The morning had begun, the way every morning had begun for the past 10 years. William Garrett woke at 5:30, reached across the cold expanse of his king-size bed, and felt the absence where his wife should have been. 15 years, and the muscle memory still betrayed him. Catherine was gone, had been gone for 15 years. Cancer had taken her slowly, brutally, leaving William to watch the woman he loved disappear piece by piece over 5 agonizing years of treatments that only delayed the inevitable. He rose, showered, dressed in a Brioni suit that cost more than most people earned in months. The ritual was mechanical now. Tie the tie, fasten the cufflinks, polish the shoes. Each action performed with the precision of a man who had automated his existence because thinking about it was too painful. On the nightstand, Catherine's photo watched him, their wedding day, her smile radiant enough to light the world. Beside it, a smaller frame, Daniel at 7 years old, gap-toothed and laughing at something William could no longer remember. Before the arguments, before the resentment, before the yacht explosion that had taken his son and left nothing but wreckage and an empty coffin. "Good morning, Cat," William said to the photo. It was the only ritual he allowed himself. The one soft moment in a day built from stone. Today is the day. I am signing it all away. Everything we built, everything we dreamed. The photo did not answer. It never did. But William could hear her voice anyway. The way grief makes you imagine the words the dead would say if they could. "Is this really what you want?" Catherine would ask. "Or is it just another way to give up?" He touched her frame, just once, a brief benediction. "After tonight, I can finally rest." The Mont Blanc Heritage pen cost $38,000. William Garrett barely felt its weight as he lifted it from the velvet-lined case. He had spent the last 10 years learning not to feel anything at all. The private dining room at Le Sommet glittered with the kind of wealth that made even billionaires pause. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Central Park like a living painting, the autumn leaves burning gold and crimson in the evening light. 35 guests filled the space with the hushed reverence of witnesses to history, reporters from the Wall Street Journal and Fortune magazine, board members from Garrett Industries, whose combined net worth exceeded the GDP of small nations, lawyers from Davis and Weber, who had spent 6 months crafting the document that now lay before him like a death sentence he had written himself. William stared at the signature line, 147 pages, 6 months of legal work, $48 billion ready to transfer to the Cross Global Foundation upon his death, with $5 billion moving immediately as operational capital, the largest charitable donation in American history. It was also the most expensive suicide note ever written. He reached for the pen. His hand trembled, just slightly, just enough that the motion caught in the corner of his vision like a ghost trying to warn him. William Garrett had not trembled in a boardroom negotiation in 40 years. But this was not a negotiation. This was an ending. Across the mahogany table, Victor Cross smiled with the kind of warmth that made people want to write checks with many zeros. 40 years old, silver-tongued, dressed in a Tom Ford suit that cost more than most people made in a month. The Cross Foundation had built 47 hospitals across 3 continents, 120 schools, clean water systems in villages whose names William could not pronounce. Victor Cross was a saint walking among mortals, and tonight William Garrett was about to make him the richest saint in history. The room fell silent. Even the waitstaff froze in place. Crystal water pitchers held like offerings to unseen gods. Camera flashes created a constellation of stars against the windows. William picked up the pen. It had belonged to his son, a 40th birthday gift Daniel never lived to use. The nib touched paper, hovering millimeters above the line where his signature would end everything. That was when she arrived. The waitress had woken at 4 in the morning, though sleep had been impossible anyway. Emma Hayes stared at the ceiling of her studio apartment in Queens, watching the shadows from the streetlights play across the water-stained plaster. 6 years in this apartment. 6 years of walls covered in printouts and photographs and red strings connecting shell companies like a spider web of crime. 6 years of her life consumed by 2 names, Victor Cross and the ghost of Daniel Garrett. On her desk, her father's photo watched her with eyes that held forever questions. James Bennett, investigative journalist, dead at 53 in a car accident that was not an accident. Emma had been 19, a sophomore at Georgetown with dreams of teaching literature to high school students. She had wanted to make a difference the way teachers do, one student at a time, with patience and care. Then the phone call came, 2 in the morning. A police officer with a voice trained to deliver bad news. Your father, Chesapeake Bay Bridge, black ice. We are so sorry. But there had been no black ice that night. Emma had checked the weather records. Clear and cold, no precipitation. She had demanded an investigation. The police had given her a report that said mechanical failure, tragic accident, case closed. 3 days after the funeral, cleaning out her father's apartment, Emma found his safe. The combination was her birthday plus his press badge number, exactly as he had trained her when she was 12. Inside, 3 hard drives and a post-it note in his handwriting. Emma, if you are reading this without me here, it means they got to me. Everything is on these drives. Password is Nightingale 2024. Sent to FBI, NYT, Washington Post. Do not investigate yourself. I love you, Emma Bean. Dad, she had tried. God, she had tried to follow his instructions. Sent the files everywhere. Got back form letters about insufficient evidence, anonymous sources, nothing actionable. Her father had been right. No one would listen. So Emma stopped asking for permission. She dropped out of Georgetown, moved to this apartment with money from her father's meager life insurance, spent her days working restaurant jobs that moved her closer and closer to Victor Cross's orbit, spent her nights studying forensic accounting, corporate structures, money laundering patterns. She taught herself to read financial statements the way some people learn to read music. And slowly, over 6 years, the picture emerged. Victor Cross was a fraud, but he was not working alone. Her father had suspected someone with connections to the Garrett family, someone who could use the name Project Phoenix without raising alarms, someone who should have been dead. On her kitchen counter, her phone buzzed, a text from Grace. Emmy, please call me. Lily keeps asking about her Auntie Emma. I told her you are busy, but she drew you a picture. Can I send it? Emma's throat tightened. Grace Martinez, her best friend since they were 7 years old. Grace, who had gotten married 4 years ago, had a daughter 3 years ago, had built a whole life while Emma chased ghosts. Grace, who had every right to be angry, but instead sent texts full of gentle worry. Emma typed back, after tonight, I promise after tonight I will call, I will visit, I will be the Aunt Lily deserves. I love you both. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. I love you too. Be safe, Em. Emma set down the phone, looked at her father's picture. Tonight, Dad. Tonight I finish what you started. Tonight I stop them. She showered, dressed in her Le Sommeil uniform, the one she had kept pristine through 6 months of double shifts. Applied minimal makeup, pulled her hair into the tight bun that made her invisible. Just another server in black carrying expensive plates to people who never looked at faces. Her hands were steady as she tucked the flash drive into her pocket. 6 years of evidence. Her father's murder. Victor Cross's fraud. The connection to Daniel Garrett. Everything. Her phone rang. Her Aunt Sarah, calling before her nursing shift at the hospital. Emmy, honey, are you sure about tonight? Aunt Sarah had been there through everything. James's younger sister. The one who had held Emma at the funeral. Who had helped her pack up her dorm room. Who checked in every week, even when Emma pushed everyone else away. I am sure, Emma said. This is the only chance, Aunt Sarah. Garrett is signing away $48 billion tonight. If I do not stop him now, Cross and Daniel disappear with everything. What if it does not work? What if he does not believe you? Then I have wasted 6 years. But at least I will know I tried everything. Your father would not want you to destroy yourself for this. Emma looked at the walls of her apartment. The investigation that had become her entire existence. The life she had sacrificed on the altar of truth. Dad destroyed himself for this story. The least I can do is finish it. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then soft and sad. I am proud of you, Emmy. Scared for you, but proud. Call me after, okay? No matter what happens. I will, I love you. I love you too, baby girl. Emma ended the call, stood in the center of her apartment. This place had been her monastery, her war room, her prison. After tonight, it would just be an apartment again. Or she would be in jail. Or dead. The outcomes felt equally possible. She picked up her keys, took one last look at her father's photograph. "See you on the other side, Dad." The morning had broken over Manhattan like every morning did, indifferent to the lives unfolding beneath its light. Emma Hayes took the subway to work, just another invisible young woman in a city of millions. No one noticed her. No one ever did. That was her greatest weapon. And tonight, she would use it to save a billionaire from his own grief and avenge her father's murder. That was when she arrived. The waitress moved with the kind of practiced invisibility that came from serving people who never looked at faces below their tax bracket. Mid-20s, dark hair pulled into a tight bun, the black uniform of Le Sommet pressed to perfection despite the worn soles of her shoes. She approached William's right side with a silver pitcher, her movements smooth as water. She leaned in. Her left hand brought the pitcher toward his glass. Her body shielded her mouth from the rest of the room. And she whispered. The words were not for the cameras, not for the lawyers or board members or the man across the table, whose smile had the structural integrity of a house of cards. They were an ice pick to William's ear, precise and devastating. "Stop. Don't sign." William's hand jerked, a tiny spasm that left a dot of blue ink on the page, just shy of the signature line. His decades of boardroom control kept his face neutral, but his heart was a war drum in his chest. He turned his head slowly, carefully, the way you might turn when you sense a predator at your back. The waitress was young, 25 at most. She was not looking at him. Her eyes were fixed on Victor Cross, and they held an expression William recognized because he had seen it in his own mirror every morning for 10 years. Grief, the kind that hollows you out and fills the space with concrete, the kind that makes you capable of anything. She leaned in again. This time her whisper was so soft it might have been his own thoughts speaking. "Ask him about Project Phoenix. Ask him where he was October 9th when my father died." Then she was gone, straightened her spine, placed the pitcher on her tray, walked away with the same invisible grace that had brought her. Disappeared into the service corridor like smoke. The room waited, cameras ready, lawyers poised. Victor Cross's smile had tightened by a fraction, a hairline crack in porcelain. William stared at the dot of ink. Project Phoenix. It was impossible. That name had been known to exactly 2 people on Earth, him and his son Daniel, a code name for a dream they had shared over whiskey in William's study 12 years ago. A theoretical charity that would change systems, not symptoms. A way to heal the world that had died when Daniel's yacht exploded off the coast of Capri. Project Phoenix had never existed. No bank accounts, no lawyers, no paper trail. It was a dream that had drowned with his son in the Mediterranean. So how did a waitress know the name? No. William capped the pen. The click echoed like a gunshot in the silence. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying the same icy authority that had negotiated billion-dollar mergers and hostile takeovers in the sale of entire companies before breakfast. "This signing is postponed." The room erupted. Victor stood immediately, his smile shifting into an expression of polite concern that did not quite reach his eyes. "William, my friend, perhaps you're not feeling well?" The stress of such a momentous decision is certainly understandable. William cut him off with a look that had made grown men reconsider their life choices. "I am perfectly well, Victor. My team will contact you to reschedule." "But William," one of the lawyers from Davis and Weber protested. "The press, the board, the arrangements." "The board works for me," William stated flatly. "And the press can report the truth. I have decided not to sign, not yet." He stood. Not toward the exit where the reporters were already shouting questions, but toward the private elevator that led to the Constellation Suite, the exclusive penthouse where he had closed more deals than some men closed in a lifetime. Marcus Stone, his head of security, was already there holding the elevator door. 6'2", former military, the kind of man who looked calm and competent even when the world was ending. "Bring the waitress," William commanded. "To the suite. Now." Marcus nodded once. His second-in-command was already moving toward the service corridor. William stepped into the elevator. As the door slid closed, he saw Victor Cross pull out his phone, his fingers moving fast across the screen, texting someone, warning someone, planning something. 10 years. 10 years William had mourned his son, built hospital wings in Daniel's name, endowed scholarships, created memorials, wept in the darkness of his penthouse where no one could see. And now a waitress with grief in her eyes had whispered an impossible name and suggested that everything he knew was a lie. The elevator opened into a sprawling suite that overlooked the city like a throne room. William poured 2 glasses of water, not wine, not champagne, water. He needed clarity. The elevator chimed again. Marcus entered with the waitress. She was still in her uniform, name stitched in simple white thread over her heart. Emma. She looked like a child standing in that vast space. But her eyes were ancient with loss. William handed her the water. Her hand was steady taking it, not afraid, resolved. You have 30 seconds to explain why I should not have Marcus arrest you for disrupting a legal proceeding. The words came out harder than he intended, but his world was tilting and he needed something solid to hold. Because Project Phoenix is not just a name, Mr. Garrett, it is the key to everything. Her voice was quiet, but it carried weight. The weight of 6 years, the weight of a dead father, the weight of truth that no one wanted to hear. My name is Emma Hayes. My father was James Bennett. The name hit William like a physical blow. James Bennett, the ProPublica journalist who had written that scathing, brilliant expose on one of his subsidiaries 8 years ago. The piece had cost William $40 million in settlements and had been 100% accurate. James Bennett had been inconvenient, annoying, and absolutely brilliant at his job. He died 6 years ago, William said slowly. Car accident. Chesapeake Bay Bridge. Emma's voice cracked for the first time. It was not an accident, it was murder. She set down her water glass, pulled a flash drive from her pocket. 6 years of her life compressed into 16 gigabytes. My father investigated Victor Cross for 18 months. He found shell companies, laundered money, phantom charities. He traced everything to a trust called Nightingale, registered in the Cayman Islands, completely opaque, but connected to one name, Project Phoenix. William felt the floor drop beneath him. My father was killed the night before he was supposed to meet with someone from your organization. Someone who claimed to have proof. Proof that Victor Cross was not just a fraud. Proof that the Nightingale Trust was controlled by someone who could use the name Project Phoenix without raising your suspicion. She was crying now. 6 years of holding it together unraveling in the stranger's penthouse. Your son did not die in that yacht explosion, Mr. Garrett. Daniel is alive. He has been stealing from you for 10 years. And Victor Cross is his partner. Tonight you were going to sign away $48 billion to the man who faked his own death to escape you. The words hung in the air like smoke from a gun. William could not breathe, could not think, could not do anything but stare at this girl who had just reached into his chest and torn out the scar tissue he had been building for a decade. No, he whispered. It is not possible. The yacht exploded. The Italian Coast Guard searched for weeks. I paid millions. I saw the wreckage. I buried an empty coffin. How much of a body do you need to not find to declare someone dead? Emma's question was a blade between his ribs. Marcus stepped forward from where he had been standing guard at the door. Sir, what are your orders? William looked at the flash drive in Emma's hand, looked at her eyes, red with tears and burning with purpose, looked at the city beyond the windows, glittering and indifferent to the collapse of his world. He thought of Daniel, his son, his only child, the boy who had loved astronomy and hated Brussels sprouts and had cried when their dog died. The young man who had fought with him constantly about the business, about control, about everything. The ghost William had mourned for 10 years. Alive. The word tasted like poison and hope in equal measure. Get the jet, William said. His voice was steel now, the grief sharpening into something else, something ancient and predatory. Assemble the forensic accounting team. I want every analyst at Garrett Tower in 1 hour. Get the lawyers from Mitchell and Stone, not Davis and Weber. They vetted Cross. He pointed at Emma. And get her a secure car. She is coming with us. Marcus started to speak. Sir, if I may ask. You may not. This is a Code Alpha situation. Full lockdown. No one speaks to anyone outside this room. Everyone in, no one out. Is that clear? Marcus's eyes hardened. He recognized that tone. The tone that had built a $48 billion empire through hostile takeovers and ruthless negotiation. The lion was awake. Understood, sir. I will track Victor Cross. He will not leave the city. William turned back to Emma. She was still standing there, water glass in hand, looking small and fierce and utterly exhausted. You are either the greatest con artist I have ever met, Miss Hayes, or you have just saved my life. There is no in-between. If you are lying to me, if any part of this is fabrication, I will personally see to it that you spend the rest of your life in prison. Do you understand? I understand, Mr. Garrett, and I am not lying. I have the files, my father's files, everything he found, everything he died to expose. William nodded once. Then we are going to war. Before they left, before they descended into the city and the war room that would consume the next hours, Emma pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline wearing off, leaving only exhaustion and terror at what she had just done. I need to call someone, she said. William gestured permission. Emma dialed. The phone rang twice before a woman's voice answered. Tired, warm, worried. Emmy? Aunt Sarah, he believed me. The relief in the older woman's voice was palpable even through the speaker. Oh, thank God. Emmy, honey, be careful, please be careful. I will. Tell Grace I'm sorry I missed Lily's birthday. Tell her after tonight, I will have my life back. She understands, sweetheart. She is worried about you. We all are. I know I love you, Aunt Sarah. I love you too, Emma Bean. Emma ended the call, looked at William, who had been watching with an expression she could not quite read. You have people who care about you, he said. It was not a question, but Emma answered anyway. I do. I pushed them away for 6 years. But they never left. Not really. William thought of Catherine, his wife, dead 15 years from cancer that had eaten her alive over 5 brutal years. He thought of how he had buried himself in work after she died, because he did not know how to exist in a world without her. How Daniel had spiraled into drinking and gambling and recklessness. How they had both grieved alone instead of together, because neither knew how to bridge the gap Catherine had always filled. You are lucky, he said quietly. Do not take that for granted. Emma met his eyes, saw the loss there, the same loss she carried. I won't, Mr. Garrett, not anymore. The elevator ride down was silent. William stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring at his reflection in the polished wood panels. He looked old, 72 years old, and every year showed in the lines around his eyes, the silver of his hair, the way his expensive suit hung on a frame that had lost 25 pounds to grief. But something had changed in the last 30 minutes. The emptiness that had defined him for a decade had been replaced by something else: purpose, rage, the need to know if the ghost he had mourned was a lie he had been living. Marcus met them in the lobby with 2 SUVs, engines running, security team ready. The press was still upstairs, still shouting questions at board members and lawyers who had no answers. By the time they realized William had left, he would be 40 blocks away in Garrett Tower, assembling an army of forensic accountants to tear apart Victor Cross's empire dollar by dollar. Emma climbed into the first SUV. William followed. As the vehicle pulled into Manhattan traffic, she stared out the window at the city rushing past. Lights and steel and millions of people who had no idea that in a penthouse restaurant, a waitress had just whispered 2 words that would unravel a billion-dollar fraud and resurrect a dead man. She thought of her father, James Bennett, the way he would work late into the night, papers spread across their dining table, coffee cups multiplying like rabbits, the way he had kissed her forehead before she left for college the last time, the way he had promised to call her after his big meeting, the way the phone had rung at 2 in the morning instead, a police officer's voice telling her there had been an accident on the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. Black ice, they said. Vehicle went over the side. Fatality. We are so sorry for your loss. But there had been no black ice. There had been tampered brake lines and a hired mechanic, and $50,000 wired from an offshore account. There had been murder dressed up as misfortune. And for 6 years, Emma had carried the weight of that knowledge alone, building her case one piece at a time, working her way through restaurants until she could get close enough to Victor Cross to stop him. Tonight she had stopped him, but she did not feel victorious. She felt terrified, because if she was right, if Daniel Garrett was really alive, then she had just kicked a hornet's nest that would fight back with billions of dollars and a decade's worth of planning. Mr. Garrett, she said quietly. He turned from his own window, his own thoughts. When you see him, when you see Daniel, what will you do? William was silent for a long moment. The city lights played across his face, making him look like a stranger to himself. I do not know, he admitted. What do you say to a ghost? What do you say to a son who let you mourn him for 10 years? Emma had no answer. Only the memory of her father's voice on the video he had recorded the night before he died. If you are watching this, They got to me. Do not be a hero, Emma. Send these files to the FBI and walk away. Promise me. I love you. She had not kept that promise, had not walked away, had instead spent 6 years becoming exactly what her father had feared: obsessed, alone, hunting the men who had killed him with a single-minded determination that had cost her everything else in her life. Tyler, her boyfriend who had loved her but could not watch her destroy herself, gone. Grace, her best friend since childhood, who had tried to pull her back from the edge, pushed away for years until tonight's phone call was the first real conversation they had had in forever. Her education, her dreams of teaching, her 20s spent in a studio apartment covered in conspiracy boards instead of living the life her father would have wanted for her. All of it sacrificed on the altar of truth. And now, sitting in this SUV next to a billionaire whose world had just shattered, Emma wondered if it had been worth it, if her father would be proud or heartbroken, if justice was worth the cost of becoming someone she barely recognized. The SUV pulled up to Garrett Tower, 60 floors of glass and steel, lit up like a beacon in the night. Usually the building went dark after 7. Tonight, every window blazed with light. The forensic team was arriving. The war was beginning. Emma stepped out onto the sidewalk, looked up at the tower, felt the weight of what came next settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. "Mr. Garrett," she said one more time. He paused at the building entrance, turned back to her. "Whatever we find tonight, whatever truth is waiting in those files, I want you to know I am sorry. Sorry for being the one to tell you. Sorry for destroying whatever peace you had made with your son's death." William studied her face, saw the exhaustion, the fear, the grief that mirrored his own. "Miss Hayes," he said gently, "I made no peace. I have spent 10 years waiting to die. You did not destroy peace. You gave me a reason to live, even if that reason is rage and betrayal and the need to know if the last decade of my life was built on a lie." He held the door for her. "Come, let us go find my son." They entered the building together. Emma Hayes, 25 years old, waitress turned investigator, daughter of a murdered journalist. And William Garrett, 72 years old, billionaire widower, father of a ghost who might not be dead after all. Behind them, the city continued its endless motion. Millions of people living their lives, unaware that in a tower of glass and steel, 2 strangers bound by grief were about to tear apart a 10-year lie and face truths that would break them both before making them whole. The elevator climbed. Emma watched the numbers tick higher. 56, 57, 58, the forensic accounting floor, where PhD economists and former FBI analysts hunted for single dollars in billion-dollar ledgers, where truth lived in spreadsheets and bank transfers and the cold mathematics of money moving through the shadows. The doors opened onto organized chaos. 12 people already assembled despite the late hour, coffee brewing, laptops opening, faces turned toward William with the same expression: ready, waiting, loyal. At the front of the room stood a woman in her early 50s, Korean-American, sharp eyes, posture that spoke of military discipline tempered by years in the private sector. Dr. Rachel Kim, forensic accountant, former FBI Financial Crimes Unit, the woman who had helped bring down 3 Ponzi schemes and unraveled the finances of 2 hedge funds that thought they were untouchable. She looked at Emma, and something flickered in her expression. Recognition. "Emma Hayes," Rachel said. "I knew your father." The room went silent. Emma's throat closed. "James Bennett wrote an expose on corporate fraud in 2016. He consulted with me on the financial analysis. Brilliant man, I am so sorry for your loss." Emma could not speak, could only nod. The grief was always there, just under the surface, waiting for moments like this to crack through. Rachel crossed the room, stood in front of Emma, and then, unexpected and gentle, she pulled the younger woman into a brief hug. "Your father was relentless when he believed in something," Rachel said quietly. "I see you inherited that." She stepped back, all business again, but her eyes held warmth. "Show me what you have. Let us finish what he started." Emma pulled out the flash drive, her father's life's work. 18 months of investigation compressed into digital form. She handed it to Rachel like passing a sacred relic. Rachel connected the drive to the main screen. Files cascaded across the display: spreadsheets, bank statements, wire transfers, corporate filings, emails. 847 individual documents organized by date and source. The room leaned forward. William stood at the head of the table, hands braced on mahogany, staring at his son's legacy of lies displayed in rows and columns. "Talk us through it," he said to Emma. Emma took a breath, then another. This was it. 6 years of work, 6 years of sacrifice, 6 years of living in the shadow of her father's death, trying to prove he had been right. Victor Cross built a 3-tier system, she began. Her voice steadied as she spoke. This was familiar territory. She had lived in these files, memorized every transaction, traced every shell company until their structures were mapped in her mind like a second language. Tier 1 is the public-facing charity, the hospitals and schools. Real projects, real construction, just enough to maintain legitimacy and keep the donations flowing. My father verified 19 actual hospitals in Africa. Victor claimed 47. The difference between reported costs and actual costs is about $1.4 billion over 10 years. The room absorbed this. Rachel was already typing, pulling up confirmation from public construction permits and contractor records. Tier 2 is the laundering mechanism, Emma continued. The money from those phantom projects flows to shell companies, 52 of them across 14 jurisdictions. My father tracked them all. She pointed to the screen where the names cascaded like a waterfall. Meridian Holdings, Phoenix Trust Limited, Nightingale Holdings S.A., Ethical Enterprises. Each one a ghost, existing only on paper, registered to mailbox addresses in Panama and the Caymans and Cyprus. The money gets chopped up, moved through banks that specialize in discretion. Deutsche Bank Luxembourg, Credit Suisse, HSBC Singapore, each transfer under $10 million to avoid automatic flagging. By the time it is done, the money is so mixed and fragmented that tracing it becomes nearly impossible. Nearly, Rachel said, but your father managed it. Emma nodded. Tier 3 is where everything converges. The Nightingale Trust, Cayman Islands, registered 2015, 1 year after Daniel Garrett's death. All the money from all the shell companies flows here, but we cannot see where it goes after that. The trust is a complete black box. Patricia Valdez, the shell company expert, squinted at the screen. Wait, there is something here. A filing error from Malta in 2016. Someone registered a subsidiary and listed a beneficial owner before the error was corrected. The name was only visible for 48 hours before it was scrubbed. She enlarged the section. The room held its breath. Sir Garrett. William's face went gray. Then it is true, he said. His voice was hollow. Daniel. But there is more, Emma said. She pulled up the most recent files, transactions from the last 90 days. Activity has accelerated. $500 million moved in the last 3 months alone, all building toward tonight, toward the signing. This was the final score, Rachel said softly. $48 billion at once. Why steal a few million a year when you could take everything? William walked to the window, stared out at the city that had been his kingdom, the empire he had built, the legacy he had planned to sign away to a lie. How long? He asked without turning around. How long have you known? Emma understood he was not asking about the last hours. He was asking about the 6 years, the investigation, the hunt. I found my father's files 3 days after he died, she said. I spent a week trying to get someone to listen. FBI said insufficient evidence. New York Times said they could not publish without corroboration. Washington Post never responded. So you spent 6 years proving it yourself. It was not a question. William understood obsession, understood what it meant to let grief consume you until there was nothing left but the mission. I am sorry, Emma said. Sorry that I am the one telling you. Sorry that your son is not dead, because that might be worse than if he were. William turned from the window. His eyes were wet, but his voice was steel. Do not apologize for telling the truth, Miss Hayes. Apologize to yourself for carrying this burden alone for 6 years. He looked at Rachel. How long to verify everything on these files? Rachel checked her watch. If we work through the night, by dawn we will have confirmation on the shell companies and money flows. The Nightingale Trust will take longer. It is built to be impenetrable. Then we work through the night. William pulled out his phone, made a call. His voice when he spoke was the voice of empire, of power, of a man who had bent the world to his will for 40 years. Robert, this is William Garrett. I need you to activate the Phoenix Protocol. Authorization code, Garrett Sigma 9. There was a pause, a voice on the other end. tinny and distant. William, that is a nuclear option, are you certain? I am certain. My son is alive, and he has been stealing from me. Execute the protocol. He hung up, looked at Emma. 15 years ago, I created a failsafe, a way to freeze every account connected to Daniel if he ever went truly off the rails. He had a gambling problem in his 20s. This was my insurance policy. Emma understood. You can lock him out of everything. Every account he controls, yes. It is buried in corporate bylaws and trust documents. One phone call and he is frozen. Rachel looked up from her screen. Mr. Garrett, if Daniel is moving money right now, we need to see where it is going. She pulled up a live tracking program, connected to the networks of banks they had identified. And there, in real time, red lines began to glow. He is transferring funds now, Rachel said. Out of Nightingale, going to a new account. Belize, registered to someone with the initials JBC. Not Daniel's initials, Patricia noted. Victor's first name is Victor. His full name is Victor Alexander Cross. Emma's fingers flew across her laptop, cross-referencing with her father's files. My father had a note in his encrypted documents. VC working with primary actor. PA controls everything. He thought Victor was the front man, but someone else was calling the shots. The PA is Daniel, Rachel said, primary actor. And right now the primary actor is cleaning out the partner. Victor is being double-crossed, William said. Daniel is taking everything. Jake Morrison, the digital forensics specialist, traced the transfer origin. The transaction is being initiated from a mobile device. GPS location is 79th Street Boat Base in Manhattan. Emma's heart stopped. A marina. He is at a boat. Rachel pulled up marina records. There is a yacht registered there. Name is New Phoenix. Ownership company is Garrett Legacy LLC. That is Daniel's trust, William said. I set it up when he turned 21. He is leaving, Emma realized. Right now, he is taking the money and running. Marcus Stone appeared in the doorway as if summoned by thought alone. Sir, my team at the marina reports yacht engine starting. Subject preparing to depart. How long until he reaches international waters? 2 hours, maybe less if the boat is fast. William stood. The exhaustion that had defined him for a decade burned away, leaving only focused intensity. Get the helicopter, now. He looked at Emma. You are coming with me. Emma's eyes widened. Mr. Garrett, I am a waitress. I am not. You are not a waitress anymore. You are the only person who can identify both of them. You have studied Victor for 6 years, and you have your father's files memorized. You are my witness. But, Miss Hayes, your father died for this truth. I am giving you a chance to see it through. Are you with me? Emma thought of her father, of 6 years alone, of Grace and Tyler and the life she had sacrificed, of the moment 3 days after the funeral when she found his encrypted drive with a post-it note in his handwriting. If you are reading this without me, they got to me. Finish it, Emma Bean. She looked at William Garrett, saw his pain and rage and desperate need to know if his son was alive, saw her own reflection in his grief. I am with you, she said. Then let us go. They moved as one toward the elevator. The forensic team would continue working through the night, mapping every dollar, every lie, every piece of the decade-long theft. But William and Emma were going to the source, to the marina, where a ghost was preparing to disappear forever. The helicopter waited on the roof, a sleek Augusta model, corporate luxury designed for rapid transport between Manhattan and the Hamptons. Tonight, it would chase a yacht down the Hudson River. Emma had never been in a helicopter. She strapped in with shaking hands. William sat beside her, face carved from stone. Marcus took the CO pilot seat, already coordinating with harbor police. The rotors spun up. The city fell away beneath them. And as they lifted into the night sky, Emma looked down at the glittering grid of Manhattan. Somewhere down there, her father's body was buried. Somewhere down there, she had spent 6 years hunting ghosts. And somewhere ahead, on the dark water of the Hudson, those ghosts were becoming real. Mr. Garrett, she said over the headset. He turned to her. In the green glow of the instrument panel, he looked ancient and young at once. A father about to see his son for the first time in 10 years. What will you say to him? William was quiet for a long time. The helicopter thrummed through the air, Manhattan spreading beneath them like a circuit board of light. I made his mother a promise, William said finally. On her deathbed, she made me promise to forgive him. Forgive him for what? For whatever he did after she was gone. Catherine knew. Somehow she knew he would struggle, that he would make mistakes. She made me promise. His voice broke. I just did not know the mistakes would be this big. Emma reached out, put her hand on his, an odd gesture between strangers, but they were not strangers anymore. They were two people bound by loss, by betrayal, by the desperate need to know if the dead could come back and if forgiveness was possible even for the unforgivable. My father's last words to me were to walk away, Emma said, to send his files to the FBI and live my life. I did not listen. Would you do it differently? If you could go back? Emma watched the city pass beneath them, thought of Tyler, of Grace, of the teaching career she had abandoned, of 6 years spent chasing shadows instead of building a future. No, she said, because this is who I am, my father's daughter, and some things are worth the cost. Even if the cost is everything? Emma met his eyes, especially then. The helicopter banked south, following the silver ribbon of the Hudson toward the marina, and in the distance, just visible in the darkness, a single white yacht cut through the water, heading for the open ocean and the freedom that lay beyond. William Garrett pressed his hand to the window, stared at the boat that held his son, the son he had mourned, the son who had let him grieve, the son who was now trying to disappear with billions of dollars and a decade's worth of lies. Daniel, William whispered to the glass. What have you done? The helicopter descended. Dawn was still hours away. But for William Garrett and Emma Hayes, the night had only just begun. The war room on the 58th floor of Garrett Tower had been dark for hours when the lights blazed to life at 11:30 that night. The forensic accounting division occupied an entire floor, a cathedral of glass and steel, where numbers became truth and lies unraveled under the scrutiny of people who could track a single dollar through a maze of shell companies spanning 12 countries. 12 people assembled in less than an hour despite the late call. They came in various states of dishevelment, suits pulled over hastily buttoned shirts, coffee and travel mugs, laptops already opening before they reached their desks. This was not unusual. William Garrett did not summon his forensic team at midnight unless empires were about to fall. What was unusual was the young woman standing beside him. Emma Hayes still wore her waitress uniform from Le Sommet. The black fabric was wrinkled now from the car ride, her hair escaping its tight bun in small rebellious wisps. She looked like someone who had been dragged from one world into another without time to adjust. But her eyes were steady, alert, the eyes of someone who had spent 6 years preparing for exactly this moment. At the front of the room, a woman in her early 50s moved with the kind of precision that came from military training, softened by years in the private sector. Dr. Rachel Kim, Korean-American, sharp-featured, with reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck, and a reputation for being able to find financial fraud the way bloodhounds found scent. She had worked FBI financial crimes for 12 years before William lured her to the private sector, with a salary that made federal work look like volunteer service. Rachel's eyes found Emma, and something flickered in her expression. Recognition followed by something deeper. Respect, maybe. Or sorrow. Emma Hayes, Rachel said. Her voice carried across the room, stopping all other conversation. I knew your father. The air changed. Emma felt her throat close, felt the grief that was always just beneath the surface threatening to crack through. James Bennett, Rachel continued, moving toward Emma with measured steps. He wrote an expose on corporate fraud in 2016. Hedge fund managers cooking their books, hiding losses in subsidiary companies. He consulted with me on the financial analysis for 3 weeks. Brilliant man, relentless. I am so sorry for your loss. Emma could not speak. 6 years and the words still caught in her chest every time someone said them. Sorry for your loss. As if loss was something you could be sorry for. As if sorry could fill the father-shaped hole in the world. Rachel did something unexpected then. She closed the distance between them and pulled Emma into a brief professional hug. It lasted maybe 3 seconds. But in those 3 seconds, Emma felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in 6 years. Connection. The acknowledgement from someone who had known her father that his death mattered, that his work had value, that he had been real and brilliant and worth mourning. Your father was relentless when he believed in something, Rachel said quietly, stepping back. I see you inherited that trait. Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. Rachel turned to the room, all business again. Show me what you have. Let us finish what James Bennett started. Emma pulled the flash drive from her pocket. Her father's life compressed into 16 gigabytes. She handed it to Rachel like passing a sacred relic from one guardian to another. Rachel took it with both hands, understanding the weight of what she held. The drive connected to the main screen. Files cascaded across the display in a waterfall of evidence. Spreadsheets, bank statements, wire transfers, corporate filings, emails with headers redacted but content preserved, 847 individual documents organized by date, source, and transaction type. The room leaned forward as one organism. This was what they lived for: the hunt, the unraveling of lies carefully constructed by people who thought themselves untouchable. William Garrett stood at the head of the conference table, both hands braced on the mahogany surface. He looked like a general surveying a battlefield, which, in a sense, he was. His son was the enemy now, his fortune the prize, and these 12 people were his army. "Talk us through it," he said to Emma. Emma took a breath. This was the moment. 6 years of her life about to be validated or demolished by people who actually knew what they were doing. She was a waitress with a community college education in accounting. They were PhDs and former federal investigators, and people who tracked billions for a living. But she had one thing they did not. She had lived with these files for 6 years, had memorized every transaction, mapped every company, traced every dollar, until the architecture of the crime was printed on the inside of her skull. "Victor Cross built a 3-tier system," Emma began. Her voice steadied as she spoke. This was familiar territory, the only territory she had known for years. Tier 1 is public-facing, the hospitals and schools, real projects using real contractors and real materials, just enough legitimacy to keep the donations flowing, and the press writing glowing profiles. My father verified 19 actual hospitals built in sub-Saharan Africa over the past 10 years. Victor Cross claimed 47. She pulled up a map her father had created. Green dots for verified construction, red dots for phantom projects. The difference between reported costs and actual costs is approximately $1.4 billion. Money donated by people who thought they were saving lives, money that went somewhere else entirely. Patricia Valdez, the shell company specialist, was already typing, pulling up construction permits from Nairobi and Lagos and Accra, cross-referencing with contractor invoices and material shipments. "The math checks out," Patricia said. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. 19 verified hospitals, average cost $3.2 million each. But Cross Foundation reported spending $4.8 billion on African hospital construction over 10 years. The room absorbed this. 12 brilliant minds doing calculations, finding patterns, seeing the shape of the fraud emerging like a skeleton from dust. Tier 2 is the laundering mechanism, Emma continued. She pulled up another document, a spiderweb of connections between 52 shell companies. The Phantom Project money flows to these entities, 52 companies across 14 jurisdictions. My father spent 8 months mapping them all. Names cascaded across the screen. Meridian Holdings, Phoenix Trust Limited, Nightingale Holdings, SA, Ethical Enterprises, Zenith Capital Partners, each one a ghost company, existing only in paperwork filed with indifferent bureaucrats in countries that asked few questions about beneficial ownership. "The money gets divided and moved through banks that specialize in discretion," Emma said. "Deutsche Bank Luxembourg, Credit Suisse Zurich, HSBC Singapore. Each transfer stays under $10 million to avoid automatic reporting requirements. By the time it is finished, tracing the original source becomes nearly impossible." "Nearly," Rachel said, pulling up her own screen. "But your father managed it. These transaction records are remarkable. How did he get access to this level of banking detail?" Emma allowed herself a small smile, the first in recent memory. He had a source inside Credit Suisse, someone who saw what was happening and gave him read-only access to the transfer logs. My father never revealed the source's identity, not even in his private notes. He was protecting them. "Smart," Rachel said, "and ethical. That source probably saved their own life by staying anonymous." Jake Morrison, the digital forensics specialist, enlarged one section of the spiderweb. "This is extraordinary work. The way these companies are nested inside each other, like Russian dolls. You open one and find another inside. Most forensic accountants would give up after the third layer." "My father did not give up," Emma said quietly. The room fell silent for a moment of respect for a man none of them except Rachel had known. A journalist who had died trying to expose exactly the kind of fraud they spent their lives hunting. Tier 3, Emma continued, her voice stronger now, is where everything converges. The Nightingale Trust, Cayman Islands, registered in 2015, 1 year after Daniel Garrett's death. She said the last part looking directly at William, watching his face as the timeline clicked into place. His son had faked his death in 2014, created the Nightingale Trust in 2015, spent 10 years building a criminal empire while his father mourned. All the money from all the shell companies flows here, Emma said, but we cannot see where it goes after that. The trust is completely opaque. My father spent his last 6 months trying to crack it. He never did. Patricia was already working, pulling up Cayman Trust registrations, beneficial ownership databases, corporate filings from Malta and Cyprus, where the trust had subsidiaries. Wait, Patricia said. Her voice carried an edge of excitement. There is something here. A filing error from Malta in 2016. Someone registered a subsidiary of Nightingale and listed a beneficial owner before the error was corrected. The screen enlarged. A document in Maltese and English, dated March 2016. A form that should have been blank, but instead showed a name visible for 48 hours before being scrubbed from the public record. Sir Garrett. The room held its breath. William Garrett's face drained of color. His hands on the table were white-knuckled, tendons standing out like cables. Then it is true, he said. His voice was hollow, empty, the voice of a man watching his world collapse a second time. Daniel. But there is more, Emma said. She pulled up the most recent files, transactions from the last 90 days. I have been tracking cross-foundation activity for 6 months. Working at Le Sommet gave me access to their private events, their conversations. The activity accelerated dramatically 3 months ago. Rachel was already tracing the transactions. $500 million moved in the last quarter. All of it positioning for tonight, for the signing. Or, this was the end game, Rachel said softly. Why steal a few million a year when you could take 48 billion at once? Tonight was supposed to be the final score. William walked to the windows, stared out at the city that stretched away in all directions, lights like stars in a manufactured cosmos. Somewhere out there, his son was alive, had been alive for 10 years, living on stolen money while William built memorials and scholarships in hospital wings in the name of a ghost. How long? William asked without turning around. How long have you known? Emma understood he was not asking about tonight. He was asking about the 6 years, the investigation, the slow assembly of proof that had consumed her entire adult life. I found my father's files 3 days after he died, Emma said. I spent a week trying to get someone to listen. FBI said insufficient evidence. New York Times said they could not publish without multiple sources. Washington Post never responded. ProPublica, my father's own publication, said it was too dangerous and they could not put their staff at risk. So you spent 6 years proving it yourself, William said, still facing the window, still not turning around, because no one would believe a 19-year-old girl with a dead father and an encrypted hard drive. Yes, the word hung in the air, simple, true, devastating in its simplicity. William turned from the window. His eyes were red, but his voice was steel. Do not apologize for telling me the truth, Miss Hayes. Apologize to yourself for carrying this burden alone for 6 years. He looked at Rachel. How long to verify everything on these files? Rachel checked her watch. It was approaching midnight now. If we work through the night, by dawn, we will have confirmation on the shell companies and money flows. The Nightingale Trust will take longer. It is built to be impenetrable. But if your son made one filing error in Malta, he may have made others. Then we work through the night. William pulled out his phone. The room watched as he made a call. His voice when he spoke was the voice of empire, of power, of a man who had bent industries to his will for 40 years and was not done bending them yet. Robert, this is William Garrett. I need you to activate the Phoenix Protocol. Authorization code Garrett Sigma 9. There was a pause, a voice on the other end speaking words the room could not hear. I am certain. My son is alive and he has been stealing from me. Execute the protocol now. He ended the call, looked at Emma with something that might have been respect or might have been shared understanding of what obsession costs. 15 years ago, I created a failsafe, he explained. When Daniel was in his 20s, he had a gambling problem. Spent $300,000 in one weekend at a casino in Monaco. I created a system of kill switches buried in every trust and corporate structure he had access to. One phone call and I can freeze every account tied to his name or social security number. You can lock him out of everything, Emma realized. Everything he controls, yes. It was my insurance policy. I never thought I would use it. I thought he was dead. The last word broke slightly. Rachel heard it and her expression softened. She walked to where William stood, placed a hand briefly on his arm. A gesture of comfort from someone who had worked for him long enough to have earned the right. "We will get through this," she said quietly. "One transaction at a time. That is how we catch them. Not with rage, but with patience and mathematics." William nodded, looked at Emma, at this young woman who had sacrificed everything to finish her father's work, who stood in her waitress uniform in a boardroom full of people with advanced degrees, and somehow belonged there more than any of them, because she had earned her place with 6 years of solitary obsession. "Miss Hayes," William said, "I am going to offer you a position. Not now, not tonight. But when this is finished, you have skills that cannot be taught in universities. You have the instinct for truth that your father had. I want you on this team." Emma stared at him, opened her mouth, closed it, finally found words. "I am a waitress with 2 years of community college accounting classes. You are a forensic investigator who has been working without pay or resources for 6 years, Rachel said. I have PhD candidates who could not do what you have done. Take the job. Your father would want you to." The mention of her father broke something in Emma. 6 years of holding it together, of being strong, of pushing everyone away so she could focus on the mission. It all cracked. "I pushed everyone away," she said. Her voice was small. "My best friend Grace got married and had a baby, and I missed it all because I was chasing ghosts. My boyfriend left because I could not stop. My Aunt Sarah has called me every week for 6 years, and I barely answered. I sacrificed everything." "You sacrificed for truth," Rachel said. "That is not nothing. That is what your father died for, what he would have wanted you to live for." Emma wiped her eyes, looked at the screens full of her father's work. Her work. 6 years of life compressed into spreadsheets and wire transfers and the cold mathematics of crime. "Okay," she said. "When this is finished, I will take the job. But first, we have to finish it." "Then let us finish it," William said. The team split into subgroups, Patricia and 3 analysts on the shell companies, tracing each one through corporate registries and tax filings. Jake and 2 digital specialists on the electronic trail, following money through the banking system with the tenacity of bloodhounds. Rachel and Emma on the Nightingale Trust, looking for more filing errors, more cracks in the armor. Hours passed. Coffee was consumed in quantities that would alarm cardiologists. The city outside the windows slowly rotated from night toward the gray promise of dawn. And slowly, piece by piece, the architecture of the crime emerged. At 2 in the morning, Emma stepped away from her screen. Her eyes burned from staring at spreadsheets. Her head throbbed from too much information absorbed too quickly. She walked to the break room for water and found she was not alone. An older woman sat at the small table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. Late 50s, Asian, with silver threading through black hair pulled into a neat bun. She wore a cardigan over a blouse that suggested she had been called from home, but had taken time to dress properly. There was something familiar about her face. "You must be Emma," the woman said. Her voice was warm, accented slightly with something that might have been Korean by way of California. "I am Margaret Chen. I have worked for William for 30 years, since before Daniel was born." Emma sat down across from her, grateful for human connection that was not about shell companies and wire transfers. "You knew Daniel," Emma said. "Before?" Margaret nodded. "I watched him grow up, changed his diapers when his nanny was sick, drove him to soccer practice when his parents were both working. I was there the day he brought his first girlfriend home. There the day he got accepted to Harvard. There the day his mother died." The last words hung heavy in the air. "Tell me about her," Emma said. "About Catherine. Everyone keeps mentioning her, but I do not know who she was." Margaret's face softened, transformed by memory into something younger. "Catherine was the heart of that family," Margaret said. "William is brilliant, ruthless in business, capable of making decisions that would devastate most people. But Catherine, she was warmth, she was laughter. She made that house a home instead of a museum. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through photos until she found one. A woman in her late 40s, blonde, laughing at something off camera. Beside her, a younger version of William with his arm around her waist, and a teenage boy with his mother's smile and his father's eyes. This was taken at Daniel's 18th birthday, Margaret said, 2 months before Catherine got diagnosed. What kind of cancer? Ovarian. Stage 4 by the time they found it. She fought for 5 years. Chemo, surgeries, experimental treatments. William spent millions trying to save her. Nothing worked. Emma studied the photo, saw the happiness frozen there, a family intact, unaware that everything was about to shatter. How did Daniel handle it? She asked. Badly, Margaret said. She set down the phone, picked up her tea. He was 25 when she died, old enough to understand death, but young enough to still need his mother. He was supposed to take over a division of Garrett Industries that year. Instead, he fell apart. She paused, sipped her tea, continued. He started drinking, gambling, lost $300,000 in Monaco one weekend, got into fights at clubs. William tried to control him, tried to force him back into line. But Daniel just got worse. They fought constantly, about everything. The business, the drinking, the money. It was like watching two wounded animals circle each other. Did William grieve? Emma asked. Oh, yes. Just not where anyone could see. Catherine made him promise at the end. Promise to forgive Daniel for whatever came next. She knew somehow, knew her death would break him and that William would not know how to fix what was broken. Margaret looked at Emma. Your father died suddenly. One moment there, next moment gone. Catherine died slowly. We watched her disappear piece by piece over 5 years. I do not know which is worse, but I know both leave scars that never quite heal. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. For Catherine, for Daniel, for William, for all the ways grief could destroy families. Do you think he's really alive? Emma asked. Daniel? Margaret was quiet for a long moment. A part of me hopes not, she admitted. Because if he is alive, it means he let us all mourn him. Let us build hospital wings in his name. Let his father spend 10 years in a living death. That kind of cruelty, I do not know if I can forgive it. But if he is dead, then tonight is just opening old wounds for nothing. And William goes back to being the ghost he has been for 10 years. The two women sat in silence, bound by their proximity to other people's grief. Margaret had loved a family that was not technically hers. Emma had loved a father who had died chasing truth. Both of them were here at 3 a.m. because love did not end when people died. It just changed shape, became something harder to carry, but impossible to put down. Thank you for telling me, Emma said. Margaret reached across the table, squeezed Emma's hand once. Your father died for truth. Catherine died asking for forgiveness. Maybe tonight we honor both of them. We find the truth and we find forgiveness, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. Emma nodded, stood to go back to her screen, paused at the door. Margaret, if Daniel is alive, what will you say to him? Margaret's face hardened. I will slap him. Then I will hug him. Then I will ask him how he could do this to the man who loved him more than anything in the world. Hours passed. Coffee was consumed in quantities that would alarm cardiologists. The city outside the window slowly rotated from night toward the gray promise of dawn. And slowly, piece by piece, the architecture of the crime emerged. Cross Foundation had built exactly 19 hospitals over 10 years. Cost per hospital averaged $3.2 million. Total actual expenditure, $60.8 million. Amount reported to donors and tax authorities, $4.8 billion. The shell companies were masterpieces of complexity. 52 entities spread across Panama, Cayman Islands, Cyprus, Malta, Singapore, and Switzerland, each one owned by another, creating chains of ownership that would take years to fully unravel in court. But they all led to one place, the Nightingale Trust, established April 2015, 14 months after Daniel Garrett's yacht exploded off the coast of Capri. Rachel and Emma were deep in the trust documents when Rachel sat back suddenly, removing her glasses. Emma, she said, look at this. But first, she turned to face Emma directly, set down her glasses, looked at this young woman who had been running on fumes and determination for 6 years. Before I show you what I found, I need to tell you something, Rachel said. about your father, and about you. Emma blinked, surprised by the shift in tone. When James consulted with me in 2016, he talked about you constantly. His brilliant daughter at Georgetown, going to be a teacher. He was so proud. He showed me pictures on his phone. You at your dorm, you at a protest, you laughing with friends. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. That was a different person, she said. That Emma died when he did. No, Rachel said firmly. That Emma is still in there. She is just buried under grief and rage and 6 years of fighting alone, but she is still there. And when this is over, you are going to need to find her again. I do not know how. You start by letting people help you. You start by saying yes when friends offer dinner instead of no because you have to work. You start by going to therapy. You start by remembering that your father died so you could live. Not so you could spend the rest of your life hunting his killers. But I have to finish this. And you will. Tonight, with me, with this team, with William Garrett's resources behind you. You are not alone anymore, Emma. Do you understand? You never have to be alone again. Emma nodded, could not speak past the lump in her throat. Good, Rachel said, because I am not just offering you a job when this is over. I am offering you mentorship. I am offering you what your father would have wanted you to have. Guidance, support, a career built on skill instead of obsession. She picked up her glasses, put them back on, returned to the screen. Now, look at this. Rachel and Emma were deep in the trust documents when Rachel sat back suddenly, removing her glasses. Emma, she said, look at this. It was a transfer log from Julius Baer Bank in Zurich, a private bank that catered to clients with 8-figure accounts and a desire for discretion. The log showed quarterly transfers from Nightingale Trust to another account, an account registered to an individual, not a corporation. The name on the account was M.D. Garrett, Michael Daniel Garrett, Emma said. That was Daniel's full name? William had walked over, drawn by the tone in Rachel's voice. Yes, he confirmed. We called him Daniel, but his legal name was Michael Daniel, after both his grandfathers. This account has been receiving funds since 2016, Rachel said. Quarterly transfers, $5 million at a time, for 9 years. That is $180 million. Plus whatever else is in Nightingale that we cannot see, Patricia added from across the room. Emma was typing rapidly now, cross-referencing with her father's files, pulling up old notes that suddenly made sense. My father had a note from 2018. He wrote, "Follow the M." He thought it stood for Malta, where some of the companies were registered. But it was not Malta. It was Michael. He was tracking Daniel's personal account. The room fell silent. They had found him. Not just the theory of him, not just the possibility. They had found Daniel Garrett's account. Active, current, receiving stolen money for 9 years. Emma's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, intending to silence it, but the name on the screen made her pause. Grace, her best friend, the one she had pushed away for 6 years, calling at 3:30 in the morning. I need to take this, Emma said. William nodded. Go, we will continue here. Emma stepped into the hallway. The tower was silent at this hour, just security guards and cleaning crews and the handful of obsessives in the war room. She answered. Grace? Emma. Oh, thank God. I saw the news. The Garrett signing was postponed. That is the event you were working at, right? The thing you have been building toward for 6 years? Grace's voice was worried, tired. The voice of a mother who had been woken by worry and could not get back to sleep without checking on someone she loved. Yes, Emma said. It is happening, Grace. Everything. All of it. My father was right about everything. Are you safe? Please tell me you are safe. I am at Garrett Tower, with William Garrett himself and his entire forensic team. We are going through the files, all of Dad's work. It is all here, Grace. It is all real. There was a pause. Emma heard something in the background, a child's voice. Lily, Grace's 3-year-old daughter, asking for water. Hold on, baby, Grace said to her daughter. Mommy is talking to Auntie Emma. Emma felt her throat close. Auntie Emma. She had missed 3 years of Lily's life, had missed her birth, her first steps, her first words, all because she had been chasing ghosts through spreadsheets. Grace came back on the line. Emmy, listen to me. I know you need to finish this. I know you need to see it through for your dad. But after tonight, you come home, you come to my house and you meet your niece and you let yourself be human again, okay? Emma could not speak, could only nod even though Grace could not see her. Emmy, are you there? I am here, Emma managed. I am sorry, Grace, for all of it, for missing everything, for being a terrible friend. You are not a terrible friend. You are a grieving daughter who turned her pain into purpose. That is not terrible. It is just sad, and I want to help you be less sad. I do not know how to be less sad, Emma admitted. I have been angry for so long I do not remember how to be anything else. Then let me teach you, Grace said. Let Lily teach you. 3-year-olds are very good at being happy, and very good at making other people happy. Emma laughed. It came out choked, half sob. I would like that. Good. Then finish your dad's work tonight. And tomorrow you come to us. Deal? Deal. I love you, Emma Bean. It was her father's nickname, the one Grace had adopted after he died, the one that made Emma feel like she was still someone's daughter even though her father was gone. I love you too. Emma ended the call, stood in the hallway of Garrett Tower at 3:30 in the morning. She was exhausted, terrified, running on adrenaline and 6 years of pent-up purpose. But for the first time in those 6 years, she felt something else, hope, the possibility that there was life after tonight, that she could finish her father's work and still have a future, that she could honor the dead without becoming one of them. She went back into the war room. Rachel looked up from her screen. Everything okay? Emma nodded. My best friend. She wants me to come over tomorrow, meet her daughter. Rachel smiled, a real smile, warm and maternal and everything Emma had been missing. Then we better make sure tomorrow happens. Back to work. The room fell silent. They had found him. Not just the theory of him, not just the possibility. They had found Daniel Garrett's account. Active, current, receiving stolen money for 9 years. William stood very still. His face had gone beyond emotion into something colder, the face he wore in hostile boardroom negotiations when he was about to destroy someone's company. What else can we see? He asked Rachel. Rachel pulled up the account details. Julius Baer had not given them access, but Emma's father had somehow obtained read-only credentials. The account showed a current balance of $193 million. Recent transactions included yacht maintenance in Monaco, property tax on a villa in Positano, Italy, and a wire transfer 2 days ago for $800,000 to a maritime broker in Fort Lauderdale. He bought a boat, Emma said. 2 days ago. He knew the signing was coming and he bought an escape boat. Jake Morrison had pulled up the maritime broker's website, found a recent sale, a 75-foot Azimuth yacht named New Phoenix, registered to Garrett Legacy LLC, delivered to 79th Street Boat Basin in Manhattan yesterday. He is here, William said, in New York, right now. As if summoned by the words, Jake's computer chimed, an alert he had set up on the banking network they were monitoring. Movement, Jake said, his voice sharp. Nightingale Trust is active right now. Someone is initiating transfers. The main screen changed. Red lines began appearing, tracing money moving in real time through the banking system. Out of Nightingale Trust, through intermediary accounts, heading toward a destination that was still forming. He is moving the money, Rachel said. Right now, while we are watching. He is cleaning out the trust. But where is it going? William demanded. The red lines converged, settled on a single destination. An account in Belize registered to a holding company called JVC Enterprises. Not Daniel's initials, Patricia said. His companies usually have his initials or some reference to Garrett. This is different. Emma was already searching. Her father's files had a section on Victor Cross's shell companies, companies he had created before partnering with Daniel. She found it. JVC stands for Julian Victor Cross, she said. That is Victor's full name. This account is his, not Daniel's. The room processed this, the implications settling like fallout. Victor is double-crossing Daniel, Rachel said. He is taking all the money for himself. On the screen, the numbers kept climbing. 300 million, 500 million, 700 million, all of it flowing out of Nightingale Trust into Victor Cross's private account. How is he doing this? William asked. I thought Daniel controlled the trust. He does, Patricia said. But trust accounts usually require 2 signatures for large transfers. Daniel and Victor must have set it up that way as a check and balance. Victor is using his authority to empty the account before Daniel realizes what is happening. Jake pulled up GPS data for the mobile device initiating the transfers. The transactions are coming from the Ritz-Carlton, Victor's hotel. He is there right now, moving money. And Daniel? William asked. Jake typed, pulled up different data, maritime tracking systems. The yacht New Phoenix left 79th Street Marina 17 minutes ago. It is heading south down the Hudson River. Current speed 28 knots. He is running, Emma said. Daniel is making a run for international waters and he has no idea Victor is stealing everything. William pulled out his phone, called Marcus Stone. Marcus, I need surveillance on Victor Cross at the Ritz-Carlton. Do not let him leave that building. And I need the helicopter prepared. We are going after the boat. He looked at Emma. She was still in her waitress uniform, exhausted from a shift that had started 12 hours ago, running on nothing but adrenaline and 6 years of pent-up purpose. Miss Hayes, you are coming with me. Emma's eyes widened. Mr. Garrett, I am not. I cannot. You can and you will. You are the only person who has studied both of these men for years. You know Victor's patterns. You know how Daniel thinks based on your father's analysis, and you have earned the right to see this through. Emma looked at Rachel. At this woman who had known her father, who had shown her kindness in a moment when kindness was a lifeline. Go, Rachel said, finish it. We will handle things here. And Emma, your father would be proud. Emma nodded, could not speak past the lump in her throat, turned to follow William to the elevator. As they left, Rachel called after them. Bring them back, both of them. We want our day in court. The elevator descended. William and Emma stood side by side, two people separated by almost 50 years and billions of dollars, but united by loss and the desperate need to know if the dead could come back, and if justice was possible, even when it came too late to matter. Mr. Garrett, Emma said, when you see him. Daniel, what will you say? William was quiet for a long time. The elevator passed through the tower, floor numbers counting down like a timer. I made his mother a promise, William said finally. On her deathbed, Catherine made me promise to forgive him. Forgive him for what? For whatever he did after she was gone. She knew somehow, knew he would struggle, knew he would make mistakes. She made me promise I would forgive him no matter what. His voice broke on the last words. I just did not know the mistakes would be this big. The elevator reached the lobby, opened onto a world that had no idea what was happening in towers and yachts and hotel rooms across the city. A world where most people would wake up tomorrow to the same problems they went to sleep with. A world that would never know how close a ghost had come to vanishing with billions. But Emma knew, and William knew, and together they were going to stop it. The helicopter waited on the roof, its rotors already spinning, creating a wind that turned the early morning air into a living thing. Marcus Stone stood beside it, speaking urgently into his radio. He saw William and Emma approaching and jogged to meet them. Sir, he said, Victor Cross attempted to leave the Ritz-Carlton 8 minutes ago. My team stopped him at the service entrance. He is currently detained in the manager's office under the pretense of a security concern. Hotel management is cooperating. Good. Keep him there. We will deal with him after we secure Daniel. The yacht, sir. It is moving fast. If he reaches international waters, we will have jurisdictional issues. Then we make sure he does not reach international waters. William climbed into the helicopter. Emma followed, her hands shaking as she buckled the safety harness. She had never been in a helicopter before, had never imagined she would chase a billionaire's son down the Hudson River in the middle of the night. But here she was, the girl from Queens who had worked double shifts and studied accounting at night and spent 6 years assembling the puzzle that would bring down $1 billion fraud. Here at the end, or the beginning, or whatever this moment was when everything changed. The helicopter lifted. The city fell away beneath them, Manhattan spreading out like a map drawn in light. Emma could see the entire island from here, could see the thousands of lives unfolding below, unaware that above them, a waitress and a billionaire were hunting ghosts. The pilot spoke over the headset. Target vessel located. Bearing 180 degrees, distance 4.3 nautical miles in closing. He is heading for the Verrazano Bridge. Once he clears that he is in open ocean. How long until he reaches the bridge? William asked. At current speed, 18 minutes. And us? We can intercept in 12 minutes, then intercept. The helicopter banked, following the silver ribbon of the Hudson south toward the harbor. Emma stared out the window at the water below, black and cold and eternal. Somewhere down there, her father's car had gone off a bridge. Somewhere in these same waters, he had died because he had gotten too close to the truth. But tonight the truth was not dying. Tonight it was flying in a helicopter, chasing a yacht, closing in on the men who had built an empire of lies. Mr. Garrett, Emma said over the headset. What if he does not stop? What if he keeps going? William looked at her. In the green glow of the instrument panel, he looked ancient and young simultaneously. A father about to see his son for the first time in 10 years. A man about to confront the ghost that had haunted him through a decade of empty mornings. Then we make him stop, William said. One way or another, this ends tonight. The helicopter raced through the darkness. Below them, a yacht cut through black water, heading for freedom. And behind them, in a tower of glass and steel, a team of analysts worked through the night, tracking every dollar, building a case that would end with prison or redemption or something in between. Emma thought of Grace, of the text she had sent. After tonight, I will have my life back. She wondered if that was true. Wondered if you could ever really get your life back once you had sacrificed it completely. Or if the best you could hope for was to build something new from the ruins. Her phone buzzed, a text from Aunt Sarah. Be safe, Emmy Bean, I love you. Emma typed back with shaking thumbs. I love you too. See you tomorrow? Tomorrow. The word felt impossible, like a promise she had no right to make, but she made it anyway. Sent it into the electronic void, a lifeline cast to someone who loved her despite 6 years of absence and obsession. The pilot spoke again. Visual contact. Dead ahead. Emma looked. There, in the darkness, a white slash of foam, a yacht running hard for the ocean, and the freedom that lay beyond American jurisdiction. The helicopter descended. The rotor wash churned the water into a frenzy, and William Garrett reached for the external speaker control, ready to call his son back from the dead and demand answers that no father should ever have to ask. The helicopter cut through the darkness above the Hudson River like a knife through black silk. Dawn was still an hour away, but the sky had begun its slow transformation from absolute night to that uncertain gray that precedes morning. Below, the water was obsidian glass, reflecting nothing, holding secrets in its depths the way water always does. William Garrett sat in the passenger seat, one hand braced against the doorframe, staring at the white wake of foam that marked his son's passage through the harbor. The vibration of the rotors traveled through the airframe into his bones, a physical reminder that this was real. Not a dream, not a nightmare. Real. 10 years. 10 years he had believed Daniel was dead. 10 years of visiting an empty grave in a cemetery in Westchester, standing before a headstone that said, "Beloved Son," reading words carved in granite that had been lies from the moment the stonecutter finished his work. 10 years of building memorials, hospital wings, scholarships, endowing chairs at universities, creating monuments to a ghost who had been laughing at him from whatever island paradise stolen money could buy. He remembered the morning he had gotten the call. The Italian Coast Guard. Your son's yacht has exploded. We have found debris. No survivors. We are sorry for your loss. He remembered collapsing in his office. Margaret finding him on the floor, calling an ambulance because she thought he was having a heart attack. The doctor saying it was not his heart. It was grief. Grief so profound it had physical symptoms. Chest pain, difficulty breathing, the sensation of being crushed by invisible weight. He remembered Catherine's funeral 5 years before that. How Daniel had stood apart from him, refusing comfort, weeping alone. How William had not known how to bridge that distance. How he had stood on one side of the grave and his son on the other. And between them was a chasm neither knew how to cross. And then 5 years later, another funeral, this time for Daniel. Except there had been no body, just an empty coffin and flowers and hundreds of people saying how sorry they were. And William standing alone because everyone he loved was gone. Wife, son, both taken before their time, both leaving him in a world that felt fundamentally wrong. Except one of them had not been taken. One of them had chosen to leave, had planned it, executed it, let his father mourn while he built a new life on lies and stolen money. The anger that William had been holding at bay since Emma's whisper in the restaurant finally broke through. It was not the hot rage of immediate betrayal. It was the cold fury of 10 years compressed into a single moment. 10 years of grief. 10 years of emptiness. 10 years of waking up every morning to a world where his son did not exist. Except his son did exist, and William was about to prove it. Emma sat behind him, pressed against the window, watching the yacht below with the focused intensity of someone who had spent 6 years preparing for this moment. She had pulled Catherine's locket from William's hand before they took off, had opened it with gentle fingers, had studied the photograph inside for a long moment before handing it back. She looked like she loved him very much, Emma had said. She did, William had confirmed. More than anything. More than me sometimes, I think. Daniel was her world. Emma had nodded, understanding without needing explanation. She had lost her father, understood the shape of that loss. But she had never lost a child, had never carried in her body and heart the knowledge that someone she created no longer existed in the world. Except William's son did still exist, and Emma could not decide if that made it better or worse. Better because death was not permanent, or worse because the death had been chosen. Because every moment of William's grief had been manufactured by the person he grieved for. She thought of her own father, of the video he had recorded the night before he died, the fear in his eyes, the knowledge that he was close to something dangerous, the plea for Emma to send his files to authorities and walk away. She had not walked away, had spent 6 years hunting the men who killed him, and now one of those men sat on a yacht below, trying to outrun his past, trying to reach international waters and vanish again. But he would not vanish. Not tonight. Not ever again. How does that happen? Emma had wondered silently as she stared at Catherine's photo. How does a child who was loved turn into someone capable of such betrayal? But she knew the answer. Her father had taught it to her through his work. Pain changes people. Grief makes you capable of things you never imagined. And sometimes the people we love become unrecognizable because we were not there when they needed us most. Daniel had needed his father after Catherine died, and William had been drowning in his own grief, unable to see his son's pain because his own pain filled every available space. And so they had both drowned separately instead of saving each other. The pilot spoke into the headset, his voice calm despite the tension radiating from his passengers. Target vessel bearing 175 degrees, distance 2.1 nautical miles. He is running hard for the Verrazano Bridge. Once he clears the bridge, he is in open water. William could see the bridge in the distance, the Verrazano Narrows Bridge connecting Brooklyn and Staten Island, the gateway from the harbor to the Atlantic. Once Daniel cleared that bridge, the legal complications would multiply. Jurisdictions would clash, international waters would provide refuge, the chase would become infinitely more complicated. How long until intercept? William asked. His voice was steady, the voice of a man who had commanded boardrooms and hostile negotiations and the reshaping of entire industries. 6 minutes at current speed. But sir, I need to know your intent. We cannot force him to stop. We have no legal authority to. We are not going to force him to stop, William said. We are going to ask him to stop. And he is going to listen because I am his father. The words hung in the air. Father. A word William had not spoken in reference to himself in 10 years. A word that had died with his son's yacht off the coast of Capri. Except his son had not died. His son had chosen to disappear. Had chosen to let William spend a decade in mourning while he built a criminal empire in the shadows. The anger that William had been holding at bay since Emma's whisper in the restaurant finally broke through. It was not the hot rage of immediate betrayal. It was the cold fury of 10 years compressed into a single moment. The realization that every tear shed, every sleepless night, every memorial service had been built on a lie his own son had told him. "Bring us down over the yacht," William commanded. "Close enough that he can see us, close enough that he knows we found him." The helicopter descended. The rotor wash transformed the water below into chaos, spray flying up in sheets that caught what little light existed at this hour. The yacht was exactly where the tracking said it would be. 75 feet of Italian engineering and criminal excess, cutting through the harbor at nearly 30 knots. Its name was painted on the stern in gold letters that caught the helicopter spotlight. New Phoenix. The name was a mockery, a bitter joke, the phoenix that rises from its own ashes. Daniel had died and been reborn, but not as something better, as something worse. William reached for the external speaker control. His hand hovered over the switch. This was it. The moment when ghost became real, when 10 years of grief met the man who had caused it. And what do I say? William asked, speaking to no one in particular. To Emma, maybe. To himself. To the universe that had brought him to this impossible moment. Emma leaned forward, put her hand on his shoulder, a gesture of comfort from a stranger who understood loss better than most. "You say what your wife asked you to say," Emma told him. "You made her a promise." William closed his eyes, saw Catherine in her hospital bed, her body ravaged by cancer, but her spirit somehow intact. Saw her take his hand, make him swear. "Promise me you will forgive him, whatever he does after I'm gone. Promise." He opened his eyes, pressed the speaker button. His voice amplified across the water, loud enough to wake the dead. "Daniel Garrett, this is your father. Cut your engines." On the yacht below, a figure appeared on the aft deck. Even from 100 feet up, even in the pre-dawn darkness, William recognized him. The shape of his shoulders, the way he moved. Recognition that went deeper than sight. The knowledge that lives in a father's bones. "His son, alive!" The yacht did not slow. If anything, it accelerated. The figure on deck disappeared into the cabin. William could imagine the scene. Daniel at the controls seeing the helicopter making calculations. How far to international waters? How fast he could run? Whether his father would actually follow through with whatever threat this pursuit represented. "He does not believe you will stop him," Emma said. "He thinks you are bluffing." "Then we show him we are not bluffing." William looked at Marcus Stone, who had been silent throughout the flight, a coiled presence ready to act. "The device," William said. "Now." Marcus pulled a small black box from his tactical vest. Matte military-grade technology that looked like nothing and could do everything. He held it up so William could see. "EMP device," Marcus explained. "Electromagnetic pulse. It will kill every electrical system on that yacht, dead in the water." "Do it." Marcus flipped open a protective cover, pressed a red button. The device emitted no sound that human ears could detect, but on the yacht below, every light went dark simultaneously. The engines that had been roaring fell silent. The navigation equipment, the radio, the bilge pumps, everything that required electricity simply stopped. The yacht drifted to a halt, momentum carrying it forward for another 100 yards before physics and the current brought it to rest, dead in the water, just as Marcus had promised. The helicopter descended further, close enough now that William could see his son's face. Daniel had come back on deck, was staring up at the helicopter with an expression that cycled through shock, recognition, and finally something that might have been resignation or might have been relief. The helicopter touched down on the yacht's forward deck. An impossible landing, testament to the pilot's skill and the desperation of the moment. The skids groaned against teak wood never designed to bear such weight, but they held. William unbuckled. Marcus moved to stop him, but William was already out, feet on his son's yacht, breathing the salt air of the harbor mixed with helicopter exhaust. Emma followed, her phone out, recording. Evidence, witness, protection for what came next. Marcus was last, one hand near his concealed weapon, eyes scanning for threats. But there was only one threat here. A 45-year-old man standing at the stern of a dead yacht, staring at the father he had let mourn him for a decade. 20 feet of teak deck separated them. 20 feet and 10 years and an ocean of betrayal. Neither man moved for what felt like forever. Just two people staring at each other across an impossible distance, trying to reconcile memory with reality. William saw his son, but not the son he remembered. The Daniel had been 35, ambitious, angry, fighting constantly with his father about business, about control, about everything. Clean-shaven, wearing suits that cost thousands, hair cut every 2 weeks. The image of corporate perfection because that was what William demanded. This Daniel was different, harder, weathered by sun and time and whatever guilt or lack thereof had sustained him through 10 years of lies. His hair was longer, shot through with gray at the temples. His face leaner, skin tanned dark from years in Mediterranean sun. A beard covered his jaw. But his eyes were the same eyes that had looked at William across Catherine's grave and wept. Or had he wept? Had any of it been real? William did not know anymore, could not trust his own memories because they had been built on the foundation of his son's honesty. And that foundation had been a lie. He saw himself in Daniel's face, the same bone structure, The same stubborn set to the jaw, the same way of standing with weight slightly forward, ready to fight or flee. Father and son, mirrors of each other separated by decades and choices that could never be unmade. Daniel saw his father transformed by grief into something gaunt and aged. The powerful man who had dominated boardrooms and bent industries to his will looked smaller somehow, older. The decade had not been kind. His hair was completely white now where it had been salt and pepper before. His face lined with the kind of deep grooves that come from carrying unbearable weight for too long. His eyes. God, his eyes were the eyes of someone who had died and been forced to keep living anyway. And Daniel knew, looking at his father across 20 feet of deck, knew that every line in that face was his fault. Every sleepless night, every moment of grief, all of it traced back to a decision he had made 10 years ago, when he had decided that freedom mattered more than truth. He saw what his choice had cost, saw it written on his father's body like a ledger of pain, and for the first time in 10 years, felt something crack in the armor he had built around his guilt, felt the weight of what he had done settle on him like physical mass. Marcus stood to one side, hand near his weapon, watching both men with the trained awareness of someone used to de-escalating situations that could turn violent. But there would be no violence here. Just two men destroyed by love that had curdled into something toxic and inescapable. Emma stood with her phone raised, recording, bearing witness. But she felt like an intruder. This moment was too private, too raw, too much like watching someone's soul crack open and spill out. But she kept recording because that was her role. The witness, the documentarian, the person who would make sure the truth, however painful, was preserved. Daniel spoke first. His voice was exactly as William remembered it. Same cadence, same slight roughness from too many late nights and too much whiskey. The voice that had said goodnight to him for 35 years. The voice that had argued with him, laughed with him, told him about first girlfriends and college acceptances and dreams for the future. The voice William had not heard in 10 years, but had never stopped hearing in his memories. "Hello, Father." 2 words. Casual. As if they were meeting for lunch. As if 10 years had been 10 days. As if the world had not ended and been rebuilt in the image of his absence. The informality of it nearly broke William. As if they were meeting after a business trip. As if Daniel had not been dead. As if William had not spent a decade in mourning. Just hello, Father, like nothing had happened. William's voice when he finally found it was steady, cold. The voice he used in depositions when he was about to destroy someone's credibility, with facts they could not refute. "Your mother made me promise to forgive you. On her deathbed, she made me promise." Daniel's face changed, the casual mask slipping to reveal something raw beneath. "Mom is gone," Daniel said. "She died 15 years ago," William confirmed. "Cancer. You were 30. You watched her die over 5 years. You held her hand at the end. You gave the eulogy at her funeral." "I remember," Daniel said quietly. "Do you? Do you remember what she asked me to promise, what she made me swear?" Daniel was silent. "She asked me to forgive you for whatever you did after she was gone. She knew somehow, knew you would struggle, knew you would make mistakes. She asked me to forgive you no matter what." William's voice broke on the last words. "I just did not know the mistakes would be this big." Emma had moved to the side, still recording, still witnessing, but also watching these two men destroy each other with words that should never have needed to be said. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture William recognized from childhood. Daniel did that when he was cornered, when he had done something wrong and knew he was caught. "You do not understand," Daniel began. "Then explain it to me," William cut him off. "Explain to me how a man fakes his own death, how he lets his father spend 10 years mourning him, how he builds a criminal empire stealing from charities, while his father builds hospital wings in his memory." The words came faster now, 10 years of held questions pouring out. "Explain to me how you partnered with Victor Cross, how you used the name Project Phoenix, the one dream we shared, the one thing that was sacred between us. Explain how you did that." Daniel's face hardened, the raw emotion replaced by something colder. "You want to know why? Because I was suffocating. Because every single day of my life was about you, your business, your expectations, your version of who I should be. I was 35 years old, and I could not buy a car without your approval, could not hire an assistant without you vetting them, could not breathe without you measuring the breath and finding it inadequate. That is not true, William started. It is absolutely true. Daniel's voice rose. Do you know what it is like being William Garrett's son? Every room I entered, people saw you. Not me, your shadow, your legacy, your empire. I was just the heir, the next version of you, never my own person. Then you should have left, William said. You could have walked away, started your own company, built your own empire. With what money? Daniel shot back. Every dollar I had was in trusts you controlled. Every asset required your signature. You held all the power and you used it to keep me exactly where you wanted me, under your thumb. So you faked your death. It was not a question, but Daniel answered anyway. Yes, I faked my death, because it was the only way to be free of you, the only way to build something that was mine, not ours, not yours. You built a criminal empire, Emma said, her voice cutting through the argument. You stole from charities, from people who thought they were helping children. How is that freedom? How is that anything but another kind of prison? Daniel looked at her for the first time. Really looked at her. Saw the waitress uniform, the phone recording, the grief in her eyes that mirrored his father's. Who are you? I am Emma Hayes, James Bennett's daughter. Recognition flickered across Daniel's face. The journalist. The journalist you had killed, Emma said, her voice shaking with controlled rage. My father was investigating Victor Cross. He found the connection to you. And the night before he was supposed to meet with someone from your father's organization, his car went off the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. Tampered brake lines. $50,000 paid to a mechanic from one of your shell companies. I did not kill your father, Daniel said. I did not even know about it until months later. But you did not stop it either, Emma countered. You partnered with Victor Cross. You gave him the money to operate. Every crime he committed, you enabled. Every person he hurt, you hurt. You do not get to wash your hands of the blood just because you were not the one holding the knife. Daniel had no answer to that. Just stood there, the weight of 6 years of Emma's accusation pressing down on him like physical force. William stepped forward, closing the distance between them until he was close enough to touch his son, close enough to see the gray in his hair, the lines around his eyes, the decade that had passed in ways both men would never recover from. I loved you, William said. Past tense, deliberate. Every morning I woke up and you were not in the world. Every holiday, every birthday, every moment I should have been able to call you, and could not. That was not grief, Daniel. That was amputation. You cut me off at the knees and left me to bleed. You could have moved on, Daniel said, but the words were weak, defensive. Moved on from what? From losing my wife and my son in the span of 5 years? From having everything that mattered torn away? William's voice broke completely now, 10 years of held grief finally rupturing. You were all I had left. Catherine was gone. You were supposed to be my legacy, my son, the person who would carry forward everything we built. And you chose to die instead. You chose to let me spend a decade building monuments to a ghost while you laughed from whatever island you were hiding on. I was not laughing, Daniel said, his own voice cracking. I was miserable. Every day. Knowing what I had done to you. Knowing I could never come back, never fix it, never explain. Then why not just tell me? William demanded. Why not leave a note, send a message? Something to tell me you were alive and this was your choice. Because you would have found me. You would have dragged me back. Forced me back into the life I was trying to escape. Maybe. Or maybe I would have let you go. Maybe I would have understood. We will never know now because you did not give me the choice. They stood facing each other, father and son, both broken by grief they had caused each other, both right and both wrong in ways that could never be untangled. Emma watched them, saw the love still there beneath the anger, saw how they stood the same way, gestured the same way, had the same stubborn set to their jaws, saw how much they had hurt each other, and how that hurt was the flip side of how much they had loved each other. She thought of her father, of 6 years spent hunting his killers, of how rage had kept her going when nothing else could, but also how rage had cost her everything. Her education, her relationships, her 20s. She had sacrificed it all on the altar of justice, and now, standing on this yacht watching a father confront his living son, she wondered if justice was worth what it cost. Your wife asked you to forgive him, Emma said to William. To both of them, really. She asked you to forgive whatever came. This is what came. This betrayal, this pain, this impossible situation. So the question is not whether Daniel deserves forgiveness. The question is whether you can keep your promise. William looked at her. At this young woman who had lost her father to lies and had spent 6 years seeking truth, who understood loss in ways most people never would. I do not know if I can, William admitted. I want to. For Catherine. But I do not know if the man standing in front of me is my son anymore or just someone wearing his face. I am still your son, Daniel said, his voice small, the voice of a child who had broken something precious and knew it could never be repaired. I am still Daniel. I became someone else too. Someone I do not like very much. Then come back, William said. Face justice. Serve your time. And maybe in 30 years when you get out, we can figure out who you are. 30 years, Daniel repeated. He looked at the horizon, at the city behind them, at the life he had built on lies. I will be 75. I will be dead, William said bluntly. But Emma will be here, your sister now, in the way that matters. Come back, Daniel. It is the only way forward. Daniel stood very still. Marcus's hand moved closer to his weapon, ready for the moment if Daniel chose to run. But there was nowhere to run. The yacht was dead. The harbor police would be here in minutes. And his father was offering him something he had not had in 10 years. A way home. I am tired, Daniel said finally. So tired of running, of lying, of being someone I am not. He held up his hands, a gesture of surrender. I will come back, I will face it, all of it. William nodded, did not move to embrace his son, could not yet. The wound was too fresh, the betrayal too complete, but he had done what Catherine asked. He had offered forgiveness. Whether Daniel earned it was a question for the next 30 years. There is one more thing, William said. He pulled out his phone, made a call, put it on speaker so Daniel could hear. The voice that answered was crisp, British, the chairman of 5 international banks. William, is it done? It is done. Execute the Phoenix Protocol. Full freeze on all accounts tied to Daniel Garrett. William, that will freeze billions. Your own accounts, too. I know, do it anyway. There was a pause, then the sound of typing. Done. Every account is frozen. His, yours, everything connected to the Garrett name is locked. Daniel's face went white. He pulled out his phone, checked his banking apps, watched as every account grayed out. $193 million. Gone. Not stolen, not lost, just frozen. Inaccessible. You froze everything, Daniel said, his voice hollow. I froze what you stole, William corrected, and what I gave you, because both are tainted now. Both are part of the lie. We will sort it out in court. Let judges and juries decide what you keep and what goes back to the people you stole from. Daniel sank to the deck, sat with his back against the cabin wall, stared at his phone like it might offer answers. But there were no answers, only consequences. Emma moved to the railing, looked out at the water as dawn finally broke over the horizon. Pink and gold spreading across the sky, chasing away the darkness. A new day arriving, whether they were ready for it or not. Marcus was on his radio, coordinating with harbor police. 2 boats were approaching, their lights visible in the growing dawn. This part was over. The chase was done. Now came the harder part, the courts and trials and public exposure of a family's private tragedy. William stood alone in the center of the deck, equidistant between his son sitting broken against the cabin and Emma standing at the rail. 2 people connected to him by blood and by shared trauma. 2 people who would help him navigate whatever came next. He thought of Catherine, wished she could be here, wished she could see that he had kept his promise, even though it hurt more than anything he had ever done. I miss you, Cat, he whispered to the wind. Wish you could tell me if I did the right thing. But Catherine was 15 years gone. The only wisdom left was his own. And it told him that sometimes the right thing feels wrong. Sometimes keeping promises breaks you. Sometimes love and justice point in different directions, and you have to choose which one matters more. He had chosen love, or at least the promise of it. The hope that 30 years from now, when Daniel walked out of prison, there would still be a father waiting. Still a chance to rebuild what had been destroyed. The harbor police boats pulled alongside. Officers boarded with the careful precision of people used to dealing with situations that could turn dangerous in an instant. They looked at Marcus, who showed his credentials, looked at William, who they recognized from newspapers and television, looked at Emma, still in her waitress uniform, holding a phone that contained evidence that would put two men in prison for decades. And they looked at Daniel, the billionaire's son who had been dead for 10 years and was now very much alive. The ghost made flesh. An officer approached William. "Mr. Garrett, I am Captain Rodriguez with the Harbor Patrol. We need statements from everyone, and we need to secure the subject." The subject, William thought. Not his son, not Daniel. The subject. The language of law enforcement reducing a human being to a procedural element. He supposed that was fair. Daniel had reduced himself to exactly that. A criminal subject waiting for processing. "He is not going to run," William said. "Are you, Daniel?" Daniel looked up at his father, shook his head. "No, I am done running." The officers helped Daniel to his feet, placed him in handcuffs, read him his rights in the practiced monotone of people who had done this 1,000 times. Daniel listened without reaction, seemed almost relieved to have it finally over, to stop pretending, to stop running. As they led him toward the police boat, Daniel turned back. "Dad," William looked at him, at his son in handcuffs, at the end of 10 years of lies. "Thank you for coming after me. Thank you for not letting me disappear." William did not know what to say to that. Did not know if he felt thankful or devastated, or some impossible combination of both. So he said nothing, just watched as his son was loaded onto the police boat, watched as the boat pulled away, heading back to the city where reporters would swarm and cameras would flash, and the billionaire ghost story would become the story of the century. Emma came to stand beside him, put her hand on his arm, a gesture of comfort and solidarity. "Are you okay?" she asked. "No," William said honestly, "but I will be, eventually, maybe." They stood together as the sun continued its rise, as the helicopter lifted off the yacht deck, freed from its temporary purpose, as the city woke to a day that would change everything. In a hotel room at the Ritz-Carlton, Victor Cross paced his suite. His phone was dead. His accounts were frozen. His partner had been captured, and his world was collapsing around him. He tried the service elevator again, found it blocked by security, who politely but firmly suggested he return to his room. He was trapped, a rat in a cage of his own making, and he knew, with the certainty that comes when all possibilities narrow to one, that his freedom was measured in hours now, maybe minutes. When the FBI knocked on his door 20 minutes later, he did not resist. Just opened the door and held out his wrists for the handcuffs and let them lead him away from the fantasy he had built and into the reality he had always known would come eventually. Marcus drove William and Emma back to Garrett Tower. The city was alive now, morning traffic building, people heading to jobs and lives and routines that had nothing to do with billionaire ghosts and murdered journalists and young women who whispered truth to power. Emma's phone buzzed, a text from Aunt Sarah. "Emmy, just saw the news. Are you safe? Please call me." Another from Grace. "Oh my God, Emma, is that you on the news? You are famous. You are amazing. Call me when you can. Love you." Emma smiled, tired, relieved, overwhelmed by the realization that she had people who cared, who had never stopped caring despite 6 years of her pushing them away. "I need to make some calls," she said to William. "Some people who deserve to know I am alive." "Take all the time you need," William said. "We are not finished yet, but the hard part is done. Now comes the harder part, the explaining." They reached Garrett Tower as the sun fully cleared the horizon. The war room on the 58th floor was still active, analysts working through the final details of the financial evidence. Rachel looked up as William and Emma entered, took one look at their faces, and understood. "You got him. Both of them," William confirmed. "Daniel is in custody. Victor is in FBI hands by now." Rachel stood, walked to William, did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She hugged him, a brief professional hug, but one that carried weight. "Catherine would be proud," Rachel said quietly. "You kept your promise." William nodded, could not speak past the emotion in his throat. Emma collapsed into a chair, the adrenaline that had sustained her for the last 12 hours finally draining away. She was exhausted beyond measure, but also lighter. The weight she had been carrying for 6 years had not disappeared, would never fully disappear, but it was different now. Shared. Distributed among people who cared enough to help carry it. Margaret Chen appeared in the doorway, saw William's face, and understood immediately. "Is he alive?" she asked. "He is alive," William confirmed. Margaret sat down heavily, put her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook with sobs that could have been relief or grief, or both. "I need to call everyone," she said through tears. "The board, the lawyers, the PR team. This is going to be massive." "Let it be massive," William said. "Let the truth be massive. We have hidden and grieved and lived with lies for 10 years. Let the truth be loud and bright and impossible to ignore." He looked at Emma, starting with Miss Hayes's story. The world needs to know about James Bennett, about the journalist who died seeking truth, about his daughter who finished what he started. That is the story that matters. Emma looked at him, at this man who 12 hours ago had been a stranger and now felt like family, like the father figure she had lost 6 years ago. Years. "Thank you," she said simply. William nodded, looked out the window at the city that had witnessed his son's resurrection, at the empire he had built that suddenly felt less important than the people in this room who had helped him survive the night. "No," he said. "Thank you. For the whisper that changed everything. For the courage to speak when no one else would. For finishing your father's work." He paused, then added, "And for giving me a reason to keep living, even when living hurts." Emma smiled, tired but genuine, the first real smile she had allowed herself in 6 years. "We are going to be okay," she said. "Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually, we are going to be okay." And as the sun rose over Manhattan, as the city came alive with the news of the billionaire ghost, as reporters gathered outside Garrett Tower, and police held press conferences, and the machinery of justice began its slow grind, Emma Hayes believed it, believed that okay was possible, that she could honor her father and still have a future, that she could be both warrior and woman, that the truth, despite its cost, was worth everything she had paid. Outside, the helicopter sat on the roof of Garrett Tower, its blades still, its mission complete, and far below, in the harbor where a yacht drifted without power, Harbor Patrol secured the scene, photographed everything, cataloged the evidence that would seal Daniel Garrett's fate, and expose Victor Cross's fraud, and give Emma Hayes the justice her father had died seeking. The whisper that had stopped a signing had become a roar that would echo through courtrooms and headlines and the lives of everyone it touched. And at the center of that roar, a young woman in a waitress uniform stood ready to face whatever came next. Not alone anymore. Never alone again. 6 months passed between the morning Daniel Garrett surrendered on a yacht in the Hudson River and the day his trial began. 6 months that felt like 6 years to some and 6 minutes to others. Time moved differently when you were waiting for justice. Emma Hayes spent those months transforming, not just her title or her salary or her office at Garrett Tower, though all those things changed. She transformed in ways that mattered more, ways that showed in her face when she smiled, which she did now with increasing frequency, ways that showed in how she answered her phone when Grace called, which was daily, ways that showed in the apartment she moved into, that had walls painted colors she chose instead of walls covered in conspiracy theories and red string. The first month had been the hardest. Emma moved out of her studio in Queens and into a one-bedroom in the Upper West Side. The day she took down the last photograph from her investigation wall, she cried for an hour. That wall had been her entire world for 6 years. Taking it down felt like dismantling her father's memorial. Rachel had been there that day, had sat with Emma on the floor of the empty apartment and said the words Emma needed to hear. "This is not forgetting your father. This is honoring him by living." The second month brought therapy. Dr. Lisa Martinez taught her that grief and rage had kept her functional but not healthy, that healing was not betrayal of her father's memory but fulfillment of what he would have wanted. The third month brought connection. Grace had shown up every Sunday with Lily and groceries and no agenda except to spend time together. Lily had been the unexpected gift. 3 years old with an absolute certainty that Auntie Emma was the most amazing person in the world. She asked for stories about Emma's father. Not about how he died, but about how he lived. Emma found herself remembering her father not as the murdered journalist, but as the man who made terrible jokes and burned every meal he cooked and read her Harry Potter with different voices for every character. By the 4th month, Emma had established a routine: work at Garrett Tower coordinating with the prosecution, therapy on Thursdays, dinners with Grace on Sundays, and slowly, carefully, the beginning of something that might become a social life. Rachel had introduced her to a journalist group. One of them, Marcus Chen, had approached her after the first meeting, asked if she wanted to get coffee. By the 5th month, they were dating, tentatively, both of them damaged in ways that made relationships complicated but not impossible. The 6th month brought preparation. The trial was scheduled. Emma would testify. The prosecution team met with her weekly to practice, to make sure she understood that the defense would try to destroy her credibility, and she needed to stay calm and stick to facts. She still worked for the prosecution, still spent long days organizing evidence, preparing testimony, coordinating with federal investigators. But she also had dinner with Grace and Lily twice a week, also went to therapy, also started dating. The transformation was not complete, would never be complete, but she was learning to be both the investigator who had brought down a billion-dollar fraud and the woman who slowly remembered how to be human. Rachel Kim had taken Emma under her wing in ways that went beyond professional mentorship. Took her shopping for courtroom-appropriate clothes because Emma owned exactly 2 outfits that were not waitress uniforms or sweatpants. Took her to lunch at places where they did not talk about shell companies or wire fraud. Just talked about life, about Rachel's late husband, and how grief changes shape over time but never fully disappears. About Emma's father and how proud he would be. About the future and what it might hold. The morning of the trial, Emma woke at 5. Could not sleep despite exhaustion. Could not quiet her mind despite the breathing exercises Dr. Martinez had taught her. Today was the day. The day her father's work would be validated in a federal courtroom. The day Daniel Garrett and Victor Cross would face public accounting for their crimes. She dressed carefully. The navy suit Rachel had helped her pick out. The simple silver necklace her Aunt Sarah had given her that had belonged to her grandmother. The watch her father had worn every day of his professional life. She looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Professional, competent, put together in ways that felt like armor. Her phone buzzed. A text from Grace. "You are going to be amazing today. Lily and I are so proud of Auntie Emma. Knock them dead." Another from Aunt Sarah, who had taken the day off from the hospital to attend. "I love you, Emmy Bean. Your father is watching and he is so proud." Another from Rachel. "Meet me at the courthouse steps at 8. We go in together. You are not alone." Emma read the messages, felt the weight of 6 years lifting slightly. She was not alone, had not been alone for months now. But today she would step into a courtroom and tell her story to the world. And knowing that people she loved would be there made the difference between paralyzing fear and manageable terror. The Southern District of New York Federal Courthouse rose like a temple to justice in Lower Manhattan. All granite and columns and the weight of history in every stone. Emma stood at the bottom of the steps at 7:55, watching people stream inside. Reporters, lawyers, curious members of the public who had followed the billionaire ghost story and wanted to see the ending. Rachel appeared at 8 exactly. Beside her was Grace, who had taken personal days from her paralegal job to be here for all of Emma's testimony, and Margaret Chen, who wore black like she was attending a funeral, which in a sense she was, the death of the family she had served for 30 years. "Ready?" Rachel asked. Emma nodded, took a breath, started climbing. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity, every seat filled, people standing in the back, the press section overflowing with reporters from every major outlet. This was the trial of the year. Billionaire heir fakes death, steals billions, gets caught by a waitress. The headlines wrote themselves. But for Emma, walking down the aisle to the prosecution table, it was not about headlines. It was about the empty chair at Thanksgiving, the father who would never walk her down any aisle. The 6 years she had spent becoming someone she barely recognized, so she could honor the man who had raised her to believe truth mattered. William Garrett sat in the back row. He had debated whether to attend. His lawyers had advised against it, told him his presence might prejudice the jury, might make it seem like he was using his influence to sway the outcome. But William had not come to influence anyone. He had come because his son was on trial, and despite everything, despite the lies and the theft and the 10 years of manufactured grief, Daniel was still his son. Margaret Chen sat beside him, had offered to come, to be there because someone who knew Catherine should witness what her son had become. They had not spoken since entering the courthouse, just sat in the back row watching lawyers arrange papers and reporters jostle for position, and the slow machinery of justice prepare to grind. William looked at Daniel, across the courtroom, at the defense table where his son sat in a cheap suit that fit poorly. Daniel had lost weight in 6 months of federal detention, had aged in ways that went beyond time, looked smaller somehow, diminished, like a man who had worn a mask of confidence for so long he had forgotten his real face underneath. Their eyes met once, brief. Daniel looked away first, shame written in the gesture. William wondered what Catherine would think if she could see this. Would she still ask him to forgive? Would she understand that forgiveness was something you promised but struggled to deliver? That love and rage could coexist in the same heart, making every breath feel like a contradiction. He touched the locket in his pocket. Catherine's locket, the one he had worn on the helicopter, the one that held her photo and his promise. He had kept that promise on the yacht, had offered forgiveness in the form of a second chance, but forgiveness was a process, not an event, and he was still processing. The prosecution team was led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Chen, 42, sharp as a blade, with a reputation for never losing white-collar crime cases. She had personally taken this case because the evidence was so overwhelming she considered it a gift, an opportunity to put away criminals who thought their wealth made them untouchable. Rebecca turned as Emma sat down, squeezed her hand once. "Your testimony is scheduled for this afternoon. Remember what we practiced. Look at the jury. Speak clearly. Tell the truth. The evidence does the rest." Emma nodded, looked across the aisle at the defense tables, 2 tables separated by careful distance. Daniel Garrett at one with his lawyer Miranda Cole, an expensive defense attorney who specialized in making the inexcusable seem sympathetic. Victor Cross at the other with Thomas Brighton, a corporate defender known for blaming everyone except his clients. Daniel looked smaller somehow. 6 months in federal holding had stripped away the tan, the confidence, the armor of wealth. He wore a gray suit that fit poorly. His hair was cut short, his hands rested on the table in front of him, and Emma could see they were shaking slightly. Their eyes met. Emma expected anger or defiance, but what she saw was shame, deep, corrosive shame that had been eating at him for 6 months. He looked away first. Victor Cross looked worse, had aged a decade in 6 months. His charm had curdled into something desperate. He kept turning to look at the door as if expecting rescue that would never come. "All rise." The bailiff's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. Everyone stood, and Judge Helena Rivera entered. 62 years old, Puerto Rican by birth, New Yorker by choice. Widow who had raised 2 sons alone after her husband, a police detective, had been killed in the line of duty 20 years ago. She had a reputation for wisdom tempered by experience, for seeing through lies, for sentences that were harsh but fair. She took her seat, surveyed the packed courtroom with eyes that had seen everything human beings could do to each other and were no longer surprised by any of it. "Be seated." The trial began. Rebecca Chen's opening statement was a masterpiece of clarity. She walked the jury through the crime with the precision of a surgeon, showed them how Victor Cross had built a charity empire on lies, how Daniel Garrett had faked his death to escape his father's control and built a criminal partnership in the shadows, how together they had stolen $3.7 billion from people who thought they were helping children. She showed them hospital photographs, real hospitals in Africa that cost $3 million to build, phantom hospitals that existed only on paper but generated tens of millions in donations. She showed them shell companies, 52 of them, explained how money moved through banks in Luxembourg and Singapore and the Cayman Islands until tracking it became nearly impossible. She showed them the Nightingale Trust, the black box where all the stolen money converged. And then she showed them the victims, not just the donors who had been lied to, but the people who had died pursuing the truth. James Bennett, a journalist who had followed the money trail until it got him killed. His daughter, who had spent 6 years finishing what he started. Rebecca pointed at Emma. That young woman lost her father because he got too close to the truth. She spent 6 years of her life piecing together evidence that everyone else said was insufficient. She sacrificed her education, her relationships, her 20s to honor her father's memory and expose these men. Today, you will hear her story. And when you do, you will understand why truth matters, why justice matters, why we are all here. The jury watched Emma, 12 people who would decide if 6 years of her life had been worth it. She looked back at them, tried to show confidence she did not fully feel. Defense openings were predictable. Miranda Cole painted Daniel as a victim of psychological abuse, a son crushed by an overbearing father who faked his death as a desperate cry for freedom. She admitted the financial crimes, but framed them as mistakes made by a damaged man, not malicious intent. Thomas Brighton painted Victor as Daniel's victim, claimed his client had been manipulated, threatened, forced into crimes he never wanted to commit. That Daniel was the mastermind, and Victor merely a pawn. The strategies contradicted each other completely. Both could not be true. But both lawyers were betting the jury would be confused enough by competing narratives to create reasonable doubt. Rebecca saw the play, smiled slightly. She had evidence that would cut through confusion like a knife through fog. The prosecution called its first witness, Dr. Rachel Kim. Rachel walked to the stand with the calm of someone who had testified in dozens of trials. She was sworn in, sat, looked at the jury with the confidence of someone who knew her expertise was unquestionable. Rebecca walked her through her credentials. PhD in economics from MIT, 12 years with the FBI, expert witness in 23 financial crime trials. Then Rebecca asked the question that mattered. Dr. Kim, what did you find when you analyzed the evidence provided by Emma Hayes? Rachel spoke for 40 minutes, explained the three-tier system, showed flowcharts of money moving through shell companies, walked the jury through bank records that proved beyond doubt that $3.7 billion had been stolen over 10 years. She explained how Daniel Garrett's personal account had received $180 million in direct transfers, how Victor Cross had accounts that showed similar amounts, how both men had profited enormously from the scheme. The defense tried to discredit her analysis, failed. Rachel had done this too many times, had anticipated every question, had answers backed by documentation that could not be challenged. When she stepped down, the jury looked convinced. But Rebecca was not done. The financial evidence was overwhelming. But what Rebecca really wanted was emotional impact. Wanted the jury to understand that these were not victimless crimes, that real people had been hurt. The prosecution called Sarah Bennett. Emma's aunt walked to the stand with the steady competence of someone who had been a nurse for 25 years, who had held dying patients' hands and delivered babies and seen every variation of human suffering. She was sworn in, sat, looked at Emma with eyes full of love and grief. Rebecca's questions were gentle but precise. Ms. Bennett, please tell the jury about your brother James. Sarah did. Told them about a man who believed journalism could change the world, who worked late into the night chasing stories about corruption and fraud, who loved his daughter more than anything and raised her alone after his wife died. She told them about the night James called her 3 weeks before his death, told her he was close to something big, something dangerous, asked her to watch over Emma if anything happened. She told them about October 9th, 6 years ago, the phone call at 2 in the morning, the police officer saying there had been an accident, her brother's car off the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, her world ending in a single sentence. She told them about finding 19-year-old Emma at the morgue, about holding her while she sobbed, about the funeral where Emma stood alone because she had no other family, about the next 6 years watching Emma disappear into obsession and grief. And then Sarah told them about her own role in the investigation, about the night 6 months ago when Victor Cross came to her emergency room complaining of chest pains, how she had overheard him on the phone saying the old man knows something, how she had photographed him without his knowledge and sent it to Emma. That photograph, Rebecca said, holding it up for the jury. That was Victor Cross the night before the signing was supposed to happen, already planning his escape, already betraying his partner. The defense objected, said the photograph was obtained without consent. Judge Rivera overruled, said Victor had no expectation of privacy in a public emergency room. Sarah's testimony lasted 90 minutes. When she stepped down, half the jury was crying. Emma watched her aunt return to the gallery, mouthed thank you, Sarah nodded, smiled through her own tears. Next came Margaret Chen, the woman who had worked for the Garrett family for 30 years, who had watched Daniel grow up, who had loved him like the nephew she never had. Margaret told the jury about Catherine Garrett, about a woman who had fought cancer for 5 years while trying to hold her family together, about her death, and how it shattered both the men she loved. She told them about Daniel's spiral after his mother died, the drinking, the gambling, the fights with his father, how William had tried to control him, not out of malice, but out of fear of losing his son the way he had lost his wife. She told them about the day she learned Daniel's yacht had exploded, how she had found William collapsed in his office, how she had watched him spend 10 years as a ghost himself, existing but not living, going through motions but feeling nothing. And then Margaret did something unexpected. She looked directly at Daniel. "I loved you like family," she said, her voice breaking. "Your mother asked me to watch over you after she was gone. I tried, but you did not want to be watched over. You wanted to disappear. And you let us all mourn you. Let your father spend 10 years in agony while you were alive and well on stolen money." She paused, wiped her eyes. "Catherine would be heartbroken, not just by what you did, but by the fact that you used the name Phoenix, the dream you shared with your father. You weaponized the most sacred thing between you. That is unforgivable." The courtroom was silent. Even the reporters had stopped typing, just watching this older woman grieve for a family destroyed by choices no one could undo. The defense chose not to cross-examine. What could they ask that would not make things worse? The prosecution rested for lunch. Emma barely ate, just sat in a conference room with Rachel and Rebecca, running through her testimony for the 100th time. "You are going to do great," Rachel said. "Just tell your story. Tell them about your father, about what you sacrificed. The jury needs to see you as human, not just as evidence." "What if I break down?" Emma asked. "What if I start crying and cannot stop?" "Then you cry," Rebecca said. "The jury needs to see emotion, needs to understand that this is not just about money. It is about lives destroyed. Your life, your father's life, William Garrett's life. All of it matters." The afternoon session began at 2. The courtroom was even more packed than the morning. Word had spread that Emma Hayes was testifying, the waitress who brought down $1 billion fraud. People wanted to see her. The prosecution calls Emma Hayes. Emma stood. Her legs felt unsteady, but she made them work. Walked to the witness stand, was sworn in, sat, looked out at the courtroom and saw Grace in the 3rd row, saw Aunt Sarah beside her, saw Rachel, saw Margaret, saw William Garrett in the back, his face unreadable. She looked at the jury, 12 strangers who would decide if 6 years of her life had been worth it. Rebecca began. "Ms. Hayes, please tell the jury who you are." Emma took a breath, then another, started speaking. "My name is Emma Hayes. I am 25 years old. Until 6 months ago, I was a waitress at Le Sommet restaurant. Before that, I was a student at Georgetown University studying literature. I wanted to be a teacher." "Why did you leave Georgetown?" "Because my father died, and I could not just go back to school and pretend the world had not ended." "Tell us about your father." Emma did. Told them about James Bennett, investigative journalist for ProPublica. Brilliant, relentless. Devoted father who had raised her alone after her mother died of cancer when Emma was 8, who had taught her that truth mattered, that standing up to power was worth any cost. She told them about his investigation into Victor Cross, 18 months of work tracing shell companies and money flows, how he had gotten close, so close he knew he was in danger. She told them about the video he recorded the night before he died, his warning to Emma, his plea for her to send his files to authorities and walk away. Rebecca played the video, James Bennett on screen, alive for these few minutes, explaining the danger he was in, telling his daughter he loved her. The courtroom watched in silence. When the video ended, Emma was crying, could not help it. Rebecca let the moment breathe, let the jury see Emma's grief. "What happened next, Ms. Hayes?" Emma told them about the phone call at 2 a.m, the police, the accident that was not an accident, identifying her father's body, the funeral where she stood alone. She told them about trying to get someone to listen. FBI, New York Times, Washington Post. Everyone saying insufficient evidence. Everyone afraid of Victor Cross and his connections. She told them about the decision she made, to finish what her father started, no matter what it cost. And what did it cost you? Emma's voice broke, but she kept talking. Everything. I dropped out of Georgetown. I lost my scholarship. I lost my boyfriend because he could not watch me destroy myself. I pushed away my best friend for 6 years because I could not let anyone get close. I spent every penny I had on cheap rent and cheaper food so I could spend my time investigating instead of living. She looked at the jury. Let them see the cost in her face. I spent 6 years working restaurant jobs that moved me closer to Victor Cross. I studied forensic accounting at night. I memorized my father's files until I could recite them in my sleep. I had walls covered in evidence, red string connecting shell companies. I looked like the conspiracy theorists you see in movies, except it was not a conspiracy theory. It was real. Rebecca let that sink in, then asked the key question. How did you know to approach William Garrett that night at Le Sommet? Emma explained. The reservation list, seeing that Garrett was signing away $48 billion to the Cross Foundation. Knowing this was her only chance. I had one bullet in the chamber, Emma said. One piece of information that would make him stop and listen. Project Phoenix. A name that should have been impossible for me to know. Where did you get that name? From my father's files. He found it in Victor Cross's network. Connected to the Nightingale Trust. Connected to the Garrett family. He died before he could prove who controlled it. But he had a theory. He thought Daniel Garrett was alive. The courtroom murmured. Judge Rivera called for silence. And you believed your father's theory? I believed my father. He was never wrong about his investigations. If he said Daniel Garrett was alive, then Daniel Garrett was alive. I just had to prove it. Rebecca walked Emma through the night of the signing, the whisper, the confrontation in the suite, the files she had shown William, the helicopter chase, the confrontation on the yacht. She asked about Emma's role in the investigation over the next 6 months, how she had worked with the prosecution to organize evidence, how she had helped track down witnesses, how her father's files had been the foundation for the entire case. Then Rebecca asked the question that would resonate with the jury. Ms. Hayes, what would you say to people who think you wasted 6 years of your life on this investigation? Emma looked at the jury, spoke directly to them. I would say truth is worth the cost. My father taught me that. He died proving it. And I spent 6 years proving he was right. Not just about Victor Cross and Daniel Garrett, but about the belief that one person speaking truth can change everything. She paused, then continued, I lost a lot, my education, my relationships, my 20s. But I gained something too. I gained the knowledge that when no one else would listen, I had the courage to keep speaking. When everyone said there was not enough evidence, I had the patience to find more. When people told me to move on, I had the strength to finish what my father started. Her voice strengthened. So no, I did not waste 6 years. I spent them honoring my father. I spent them seeking justice. I spent them proving that wealth does not make you untouchable, that even billionaires can be held accountable, that truth wins eventually if you are brave enough to fight for it. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Rebecca let the moment hold, then said quietly, no further questions. Miranda Cole, Daniel's lawyer, approached for cross-examination. She was smart enough to know she could not destroy Emma's credibility, but she tried to create sympathy for Daniel. Ms. Hayes, you lost your father. My client lost his mother. Do you think grief can make people do things they would not normally do? Yes, Emma said. Grief changes people. I understand that. But grief does not excuse faking your death, does not excuse stealing billions, does not excuse partnering with the man who had my father killed. My client did not kill your father. No. His partner did. The partner he chose. The partner he funded. The crimes Victor Cross committed, Daniel Garrett enabled. That makes him responsible. Cole tried other approaches. Tried to suggest Emma had a financial motive because William had offered her a job. Tried to suggest she was biased against Daniel. Nothing worked. Emma had spent 6 years preparing for this moment, had anticipated every question. When Cole sat down, Emma had held her ground completely. Thomas Brighton, Victor's lawyer, did not even try. He knew Emma had nothing to gain from lying, knew her testimony was devastating to both defendants. The witness may step down. Emma walked back to the prosecution table on legs that barely held her. Rebecca squeezed her shoulder, whispered, "You were perfect. The jury loved you." Emma sat, felt the adrenaline drain away, felt exhaustion replace it, but also relief. She had told her story, had honored her father, had spoken truth to a room full of people who had no choice but to listen. The trial continued for 3 more weeks. Expert witnesses, financial analysts, FBI agents who had investigated James Bennett's death and found the tampered brake lines, the mechanic who had been paid to sabotage the car, and had finally confessed in exchange for immunity. Then came the defense witnesses. Daniel Garrett took the stand against his lawyer's advice. The courtroom fell silent as he was sworn in. He looked smaller on the witness stand, younger despite his 45 years, like a child called to account for breaking something precious and irreplaceable. His lawyer, Miranda Cole, led him through what they had rehearsed: the childhood, the pressure, the impossible expectations of being William Garrett's only son and heir. Tell the jury about your relationship with your father before your mother died. Daniel took a breath, looked down at his hands. It was complicated. He loved me. I know he loved me. But his love came with conditions. I had to dress a certain way, talk a certain way, pursue business instead of the astronomy I actually cared about. Every decision had to be approved, every friend vetted. I could not breathe without permission. And your mother? Daniel's voice broke. She was the buffer, the translator between us. When Dad was too harsh, she would soften him. When I was too rebellious, she would calm me. She was the bridge. And when she died, the bridge collapsed. Tell the jury about her illness. Daniel was crying now. It took 5 years. 5 years of watching her disappear. Chemo, surgeries that bought months but never years. She was so strong, never complained, just fought because she did not want to leave us. He paused, wiped his eyes. But she did leave, and I did not know how to exist without her. My father and I could not communicate anymore. Everything he said sounded like criticism. Everything I said sounded like rebellion. What happened after she died? Daniel looked at his father in the back row. William's face was wet with tears, but his expression was unreadable. I fell apart, started drinking heavily, gambling, lost $300,000 in Monaco, got into fights. I was drowning and I did not know how to ask for help. And Dad tried to help the only way he knew how, by controlling me more, by treating me like an asset that needed management instead of a son who needed to grieve. So you faked your death? Yes, I faked my death because it was the only way I could see to be free. Free of the expectations, free of the control. He looked at the jury. I know how it sounds. Cruel and selfish and unforgivable. And it was all of those things. But in that moment, standing on the dock in Capri, paying mercenaries to blow up my yacht while I watched from a speedboat, it felt like the only option. Did you think about what it would do to your father? Every day. Every single day for 10 years. I watched him from afar through news reports. Watched him build hospital wings in my name. Watched him age a decade in 5 years. Watched him become a ghost himself. And I told myself it was not my fault. He looked down, but I was not the victim. He was, and I was the one who made him that way. Miranda walked him through the partnership with Victor Cross, how the money had piled up and the crimes had compounded, and somewhere along the way, Daniel had stopped being a man escaping his father and become a criminal stealing from people who could not afford it. He admitted the crimes, admitted every count, admitted that his pain did not excuse the harm he had caused. But you did hurt people, Rebecca said on cross-examination. You hurt your father. You hurt Emma Hayes by enabling the man who killed her father. You hurt the donors. Your desire for freedom does not erase the harm you caused. Rebecca pulled up a photograph, security footage from the dock in Capri. Daniel standing with men who would blow up his yacht, his face visible, calm, no hesitation. This is you, 10 years ago, making a choice. You hired mercenaries, you paid them $3 million. You recorded a video explaining your plan. This was not desperation. This was premeditation. She played the video, Daniel's confession from 10 years ago. My name is Daniel Garrett. Today I disappear. My father gave me everything except autonomy. I am building my own empire. Victor Cross is my partner. When I am ready, I will take everything. The courtroom heard the words, heard the lack of remorse, heard Daniel planning not just his escape, but his father's exploitation. Mr. Garrett, Rebecca said, that man in the video does not sound like someone desperate for freedom. He sounds like someone planning revenge. Which was it? Daniel could not answer. Because the truth was, it had been both. Freedom and revenge. the desire to be free, and the desire to make his father suffer. When he stepped down, he looked broken. The jury looked unmoved. Victor Cross took the stand and melted down completely. Tried to blame everything on Daniel. Said he had been threatened, blackmailed, forced into crimes he never wanted to commit. Rebecca demolished him with evidence. Phone records showing Victor had initiated the partnership. Bank records showing he had created his own secret accounts. The testimony of the mechanic who had been paid from Victor's shell company to tamper with James Bennett's car. When Victor started screaming that it was all Daniel's fault, that he was the real victim, the judge called a recess. Victor was led away still shouting. The trial ended on a Wednesday. Closing arguments were Friday. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, short by the standards of complex financial crimes, a sign they had been convinced by the evidence. The verdict came back on Monday morning. The courtroom was packed again. Emma sat between Rachel and Grace, holding both their hands. William was in the back row, Margaret beside him. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. In the case of United States versus Daniel Garrett, on the count of wire fraud, what is your verdict? Guilty. On 54 counts, the foreman read guilty again and again. Daniel sat motionless. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder. He did not react. In the case of United States versus Victor Cross, on the count of conspiracy to commit murder, what is your verdict? Guilty. On 48 counts, Victor was found guilty of everything. He collapsed into his chair, started crying. No one felt sorry for him. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Emma spent those weeks in a strange liminal space. The trial was over. Justice had been served in the form of a verdict. But it did not feel finished. Would not feel finished until the judge spoke the sentence that would define how long these men would pay for their crimes. The sentencing hearing was shorter than the trial, but no less emotional. Rebecca presented victim impact statements, letters from donors who had been lied to, from families in Africa who had been promised hospitals that never came, and from Emma, who spoke directly to the judge about her father, about 6 years spent seeking justice, about how no sentence could bring him back, but accountability mattered anyway. Judge Rivera listened to everything, read everything, then called for silence as she prepared to speak. She looked at Victor Cross first. Mr. Cross, you weaponized charity. You took people's desire to help others and turned it into profit. You commissioned the murder of a journalist who was exposing your fraud. You showed no remorse until you were caught, and even then your remorse was only for yourself. You will serve 32 years in federal prison. Victor sobbed. 32 years. He would be 72 when he got out, if he survived. Then Judge Rivera turned to Daniel Garrett. Mr. Garrett, your case is more complex. You experienced genuine trauma with your mother's death. Your father was controlling in ways that clearly damaged you. But millions of people experience trauma and controlling parents. They do not fake their own deaths. They do not steal billions. They do not let their fathers mourn them for 10 years. She paused, let her words settle. Your pain was real. Your choices were criminal. The law does not excuse one because of the other. However, I also see something else. I see a man who, when confronted by his father on that yacht, chose to surrender, who could have fought or fled but instead chose to face justice. That matters. Judge Rivera looked at her notes, then back at Daniel. You will serve 35 years in federal prison. You will be eligible for parole in 28 years. It was less than the maximum, more than Daniel had hoped for. He nodded, accepted it. The judge continued, I am also recommending intensive therapy during your incarceration. You have 28 years to become the man your mother believed you could be. Use them wisely. Daniel was led away in handcuffs. He looked back once at his father. William's face was wet with tears, but he nodded. An acknowledgement. Not forgiveness yet, but the promise that it might someday be possible. Outside the courthouse, Emma stood on the steps with Grace and Aunt Sarah and Rachel. Reporters swarmed, asked questions, wanted to know how she felt. Emma thought about it, then spoke. Justice is not the same as closure. My father is still dead. Daniel Garrett's father still lost 10 years. The people who donated to fake charities still lost their money. Nothing can undo those harms. But accountability matters. Truth matters. The fact that these men will face consequences matters, not just for me and my father, but for everyone who has ever wondered if the powerful can be held to account, the answer is yes, they can. It just takes courage. It takes patience. It takes people willing to speak truth, even when no one wants to listen. She looked at the camera, spoke directly to anyone who might be watching and wondering if their voice mattered. If you see something wrong, if you have evidence no one believes, if you think you are too small to make a difference, you are not. One voice can change everything. I am proof of that. My father is proof of that. Do not give up. The reporters asked more questions, but Emma was done. She turned and walked down the steps with the women who had helped her survive, who had reminded her that she was not alone, that she never had to be alone again. They went to Grace's house. Lily ran to the door when they arrived, throwing her arms around Auntie Emma's legs. "Did you win?" Lily asked. "Mommy said you were fighting bad guys." "We won," Emma said, picking her up. "The bad guys are going to jail for a very long time." "Good," Lily said with the absolute certainty of a child who believes in justice. "Bad guys should go to jail." That night, Emma sat in Grace's living room with the women who had become her family. They did not talk about the trial, did not talk about sentences or appeals or the years of legal work still ahead. They just talked about life, about Lily's upcoming birthday, about Grace's promotion at work, about Rachel's plans to retire in 5 years, about Aunt Sarah's grandson who was starting college. They talked about the future, about possibility, about the fact that Emma was 25 years old and had decades ahead of her to build something beautiful from the ruins of the past 6 years. Later, alone in her apartment, Emma opened her laptop, looked at her father's photo on her desk, and for the first time in 6 years, felt at peace with what she had done. "I finished it, Dad," she whispered. "I finished what you started. They are both going to prison. Justice won." She imagined his response, imagined him proud, but also worried, asking if she was okay, if she had remembered to live while seeking justice for his death. "I am okay," she told the photo. "I am going to be okay. I have people now. I have Grace and Lily. I have Aunt Sarah. I have Rachel. I am learning to be human again." She closed the laptop, turned off the light, went to bed for the first time in 6 years without the weight of unfinished business crushing her chest. Tomorrow, she would start working on the next case. There were always more frauds to uncover, more truths to speak, more victims who needed someone to believe them. But tonight, she would rest, would let herself feel the victory of this moment before moving on to the next fight, would honor her father by living the life he had died hoping she would have. Justice had been served. The story was not over. But this chapter, the one that had started with a whisper in a restaurant and ended with a verdict in a courtroom, this chapter was complete. And Emma Hayes, daughter of James Bennett, could finally begin writing the next one. 3 months after the sentencing, William Garrett stood in his penthouse at dawn and realized something had changed. Not in the room. The room looked the same, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, furniture chosen by designers who understood that wealth should whisper, not shout. Catherine's photo still on the nightstand where it had been for 15 years. What had changed was him. For the first time in a decade, he had woken without the immediate crush of grief, had opened his eyes and felt something other than the weight of absence, had stood and dressed and made coffee, and only when he sat down with the newspaper did he realize he had not yet spoken to Catherine's photograph. He walked back to his bedroom, picked up the frame, studied his wife's face in the morning light. "Good morning, Kat. I forgot to say good morning. I am sorry." But he was not sorry. Not really. Because Catherine would have understood, would have been pleased that he was healing, that life was reasserting itself after 10 years of suspended animation. He had spent the previous evening with Margaret going through boxes of Catherine's belongings, things he had not been able to look at when she died, things he had boxed up and stored and tried to forget because remembering was too painful. Margaret had been gentle, but insistent. 15 years was long enough to hide from grief. Time to face what Catherine had left behind. They had found the journal in the third box, brown leather, worn at the edges, filled with Catherine's handwriting, her thoughts during the final year of her life, entries about pain and treatment and the slow acceptance of mortality, but also entries about William and Daniel, about the family she would be leaving behind. William had read through the night, wept through most of it, but also found comfort in Catherine's voice reaching across 15 years to speak truth he had needed to hear. One entry in particular had struck him, written 3 weeks before she died. William buries himself in work when he is scared. Danny gets reckless when he is hurt. Both are running from the same thing, fear of losing control. After I am gone, they will need each other more than ever, but they will not know how to reach across the divide I have kept bridged. I am afraid for them, afraid of what they will become without someone to translate between their different languages of love. William had called Margaret at 2 in the morning, asked her to come back. When she arrived, he showed her the journal. She knew, Margaret had said. Catherine knew Daniel would struggle, knew you would not know how to help him. She tried to prepare you both, but grief does not follow instructions. There was something else in the journal, a sealed envelope marked for Daniel. Margaret had given it to William that morning with instructions to deliver it himself. Now William stood in his penthouse holding both the journal and the envelope. Today was prison visiting day. 6 months since Daniel had been sentenced. 6 months of weekly visits where William sat across from his son, and they struggled to find words that could bridge 10 years of lies. The visits had been awkward at first, painful. Daniel could barely look at him. William could barely speak without his voice breaking. They had sat in silence more than once, just 2 men in a room divided by unbreakable glass and choices that could never be unmade. But slowly, visit by visit, something had shifted. Daniel had started talking about his therapy, about the things he was learning, about the slow process of understanding why he had done what he had done. William had started talking about the foundation, about Emma, about the work being done in Catherine's name. They were not father and son yet, not in any real sense, but they were beginning to be something. 2 people trying to find their way back to each other across an impossible distance. Margaret met him in the lobby. She was coming today too, had not seen Daniel since the sentencing, had needed time to process her own grief and anger before she could face the boy she had helped raise. "Are you ready?" William asked. "No," Margaret said honestly, "but Catherine would want me to be here, so here I am." They drove to the Federal Correctional Facility in silence. It was 2 hours north of the city. Minimum security despite the length of Daniel's sentence, a concession to his cooperation, and the fact that he was not considered dangerous. Just broken. The visiting room was institutional in its blandness. Gray walls, metal tables, guards standing at strategic positions, other inmates with their families, children visiting fathers, wives visiting husbands. The full weight of consequences made visible in uncomfortable chairs and supervised conversations. Daniel entered in prison khakis. 6 months had aged him in ways that went beyond time. His hair was completely gray now, his face thinner, but his eyes were different, clearer somehow. The armor of denial stripped away, leaving something more honest beneath. He saw Margaret and stopped, his face crumpled, tears immediate and uncontrolled. Margaret stood, walked to him, and did what she had promised Emma she would do. She slapped him across the face, hard. The sound echoed in the visiting room. Other conversations stopped. Guards moved forward slightly. Then Margaret pulled him into a fierce hug, held him while he sobbed into her shoulder like the child he had once been. "Your mother would be so ashamed of you," Margaret whispered, "and so heartbroken, and so relieved you are finally facing what you did." She stepped back, looked at him with eyes full of love and grief and disappointment. "But she would also be proud that you surrendered, that you are here, that you are trying to become better. That has to be enough." They sat, William across from Daniel, Margaret beside William, the family that remained trying to figure out how to be a family again. William pulled out the journal, set it on the table between them. "Your mother kept a journal her last year. I found it 3 nights ago. She wanted you to have this." He slid the sealed envelope across the table, Daniel's name in Catherine's handwriting. Daniel picked it up with shaking hands, stared at it like it might explode. "Can I read it now?" "We can wait outside if you need privacy." "No, stay please." Daniel opened the envelope, pulled out 3 pages of his mother's handwriting, began to read. William watched his son's face cycle through emotions. Shock, grief, something that might have been relief. When Daniel finished, he set the letter down carefully, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. which perhaps it was. She knew, Daniel said, his voice broken. She knew I would mess up. She knew I would hurt you. And she loved me anyway. What did she say? Margaret asked gently. Daniel looked at them, then read aloud. My dearest Danny, if you are reading this, I am gone, and you are lost. I know you, my son. You think your father does not understand you. You are wrong. He understands you too well. You are exactly like him. Stubborn, brilliant, terrified of being weak. When I am gone, you will want to run. Do not run. Running from pain does not work. I tried when I was diagnosed. Your father will try to control you. He does not mean to suffocate. He is trying to keep you safe the way he could not keep me safe from cancer. Love him, Danny, even when he makes it hard, especially then. And if you ever fake your own death or do something equally dramatic, remember this. You can always come home. Always. I believe in second chances. I believe in you. Even when you do not believe in yourself. Especially then, Mom. The visiting room was silent except for Daniel's crying. William reached across the table, put his hand over his son's hand. First time he had touched Daniel since the yacht. She asked me to forgive you, William said. I am trying, Daniel. Every day I am trying. I do not deserve forgiveness. No, you do not. But your mother believed in second chances, and I promised her. So I will keep trying for 28 years. And when you walk out of here, I will be dead. But Emma will be waiting. She is your sister now, in every way that matters. Daniel looked up, eyes red, face wet. Why? Why would Emma want anything to do with me? I enabled the man who killed her father. Because she understands something I am still learning. That people are more than the worst thing they have ever done. That redemption is possible even when it seems impossible. That holding on to rage only destroys the person holding it. William paused. She visits me every week. We have dinner, Tuesday nights. It started as business, foundation planning, but it became more. She lost her father. I lost my son. We found each other in the wreckage. She is teaching me how to be human again. Tell her thank you, Daniel said, for saving you, for finishing what her father started, for being brave enough to whisper when no one else would speak. You can tell her yourself. She asked if she could visit you next month, if you were ready. Daniel's face showed shock, then something like hope. She wants to visit me? She wants to understand you, wants to see if forgiveness is possible. She does not promise anything, but she is willing to try. Margaret squeezed Daniel's hand. We are all willing to try. That is what family does. We try. The visit lasted 2 hours. They talked about the foundation, about the trial, about Daniel's life in prison. He taught GED classes to inmates who had never finished high school, worked in the library, attended therapy 3 times a week, was slowly becoming someone he could live with. When visiting time ended, Daniel hugged Margaret, hugged his father. Brief, awkward embraces that meant more than words. As William and Margaret walked to the car, Margaret spoke. Catherine would be pleased, not happy, but pleased that we are trying. William nodded. Felt lighter than he had in years. Not healed. Healing was not that simple. But moving toward healing, which was all anyone could ask. The Bennett Chen Foundation for Truth and Justice opened its doors 4 months after Daniel's sentencing. The office occupied the 10th floor of a building in downtown Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows, conference rooms, workspaces for 20 people, a wall dedicated to James Bennett and Catherine Garrett, photos, quotes, the reminder of why the work mattered. Emma stood in the main conference room the morning before the official opening, looked at her father's photo on the wall, at the words beneath it. Truth is worth the cost, but you do not have to pay it alone. Rachel came to stand beside her, put an arm around Emma's shoulders. He would be proud. Emma nodded, could not speak past the emotion in her throat. The opening ceremony was that evening. 500 guests, journalists from 60 countries, donors, board members, families of journalists who had been killed pursuing truth. And at the center of it all, Emma Hayes, 26 years old, executive director of a foundation with a $4 billion endowment. William had insisted on naming the foundation for both James Bennett and Catherine Chen Garrett. Catherine's maiden name, because truth needed warriors and hearts, because both mattered equally. The ceremony began at 7. Emma wore a navy dress Rachel had helped her pick out. Simple, professional, nothing that would distract from the message. She stood at the podium looking out at faces that represented the global fight for truth. She spoke for 20 minutes, not about herself, but about her father, about Catherine, about the cost of truth and the importance of community, about making sure no journalist's family suffered alone, no whistleblower stood alone, no truth seeker was isolated. When she finished, the applause lasted 3 minutes. But Emma was not looking at the crowd. She was looking at the back row where William sat beside Grace and Lily, where Aunt Sarah sat beside Margaret, where Marcus sat holding her jacket because she had been too nervous to remember where she put it, where Rachel sat with tissues because she cried at everything that mattered, her family, not by blood, by choice, by shared grief and shared purpose and the willingness to stand together when standing alone was too hard. William spoke next, talked about Catherine, about how she had believed in second chances, how she had asked him to forgive, how forgiveness was hard, but love was harder, and both were necessary. He announced the first grants, 12 investigations, 12 journalists in dangerous situations, 12 families who would be protected while truth was pursued. The first grant went to a young woman from Nigeria, Dr. Amina Okonkwo, investigating pharmaceutical fraud at Medicorp Global, a case that would become the foundation's first major victory. Dr. Okonkwo stood, spoke briefly, thanked the foundation, then said something that made Emma understand the stakes. Medicorp has been testing unapproved drugs in my country for 5 years. 63 people have died. Children, mostly. The government will not investigate because Medicorp has connections. But I have evidence. I have doctors willing to testify. What I did not have was safety or resources. Now I have both. Thank you for believing Nigerian lives matter as much as American lives. Emma felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. This was not theoretical. This was real people risking real lives for real truth. And the foundation would either protect them or fail them. There was no middle ground. After the ceremony, Emma found Dr. Okonkwo. I need you to understand something, Emma said. My father died investigating fraud because he did not have protection. I will not let that happen to you. We will provide security, legal support, safe houses if needed. But you have to promise me something in return. What? If it gets too dangerous, you walk away. No story is worth your life. Dr. Okonkwo smiled sadly. That is what my husband said. But some truths are worth dying for. Not because we want to die, but because we cannot live knowing we stayed silent. Emma understood. Had lived that truth for 6 years. But she also understood something else. Her father would have wanted her to protect others from making his choice, from dying alone for truth that no one believed. The foundation will make sure you are not alone, Emma said. That is the promise. You will not fight alone. 2 years after the foundation opened, Emma sat in her office reviewing case files. The Medicorp investigation was in its final stages. Dr. Okonkwo and her team had spent 22 months building an airtight case, had tracked 63 deaths to unapproved medications, had found internal documents showing Medicorp executives knew about the risks and approved testing anyway, had lined up 12 doctors willing to testify and 4 government officials ready to cooperate. The foundation had spent $2.3 million on the investigation. Security teams, legal support, safe houses for 3 doctors whose lives had been threatened, 1 attempted kidnapping that had been thwarted, countless hours of coordination with international law enforcement, and now it was ready. Publication day was set for tomorrow. Simultaneous release in Washington Post, BBC, and The Guardian. A coordinated exposure that would make it impossible for Medicorp to contain or deny. Emma called Dr. Okonkwo on video conference. Are you ready for tomorrow? Dr. Okonkwo looked exhausted but determined. 22 months of work showed in her face. But so did hope. I am ready. My father died of preventable illness because he could not afford real medicine. These 63 people died because Medicorp treated them as test subjects instead of humans. Tomorrow, the world knows. Tomorrow, they face justice. Emma felt tears in her eyes. Your father would be proud. My father would be proud. We are finishing what they could not. That night, Emma could not sleep. Lay awake thinking about the next day, about what would happen when the articles published, about Medicorp's response, about the backlash Dr. Okonkwo would face, about whether the foundation had done enough to protect everyone involved. At 3 in the morning, she gave up on sleep, made coffee, sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, pulled up the final articles that would publish in 6 hours, read them one more time, saw her father's methodology in the structure, his voice in the careful documentation, his spirit in the refusal to let power hide truth. Marcus found her at 5, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, sat beside her in silence until the sun came up. At 6 a.m. Eastern Time, the article's published. Medicorp Global tested unapproved drugs on Nigerian patients, resulting in 63 deaths. The Washington Post led with internal documents. The BBC focused on victim testimonies. The Guardian provided the financial trail, showing how Medicorp had paid government officials to allow the testing. Emma watched the internet explode. Twitter, Reddit, news sites around the world picking up the story. Medicorp's stock plummeting. $118 per share at market open. By noon, it was at $43. By market close, $22. The foundation's communication team fielded hundreds of calls, reporters wanting interviews with Emma, with Dr. Okonkwo, with the foundation itself. William had hired a crisis PR firm months ago in preparation. They managed the flood. But what mattered most was not the press. It was the response. By the end of day 1, the Nigerian government announced a criminal investigation. The FDA launched an inquiry into Medicorp's drug approval processes. 3 members of Congress called for hearings. The CEO of Medicorp resigned. 2 board members followed. By the end of week 1, the FBI raided Medicorp headquarters. Interpol issued arrest warrants for 4 executives. Stock was at $15 and falling. Emma received a call from Dr. Okonkwo. "We did it," Dr. Okonkwo said. She was crying. 22 months, 63 deaths, and finally justice. "My father's name will be mentioned in the Washington Post article tomorrow. They are doing a follow-up on victims' families. He died 20 years ago, but tomorrow the world will know he mattered." Emma was crying too. "My father died 6 years ago investigating fraud. He never saw justice. But because of what he taught me, because of what you did, 63 families will see justice. That is everything." She paused. "We did it, Dad. We got them." That evening, the foundation held a small gathering. Just the core team. Emma, Rachel, Grace, William, Margaret, and the 12 staff members who had worked on Medicorp. They did not celebrate. 63 people were still dead, but they acknowledged what had been accomplished. Truth spoken. Power held accountable. Justice served. William stood to speak. "6 years ago, a waitress whispered in my ear and saved my life. Not just by stopping a fraud, but by reminding me that purpose matters more than wealth. That legacy is not what you build, but who you protect. Tonight we proved that the foundation Catherine and James would have wanted actually works. We protected someone who was speaking truth. We gave her the resources to finish what she started. We made sure she did not die alone the way James did." He looked at Emma. "Your father would be so proud, not just of the investigation, but of you, of who you have become, of how you turned grief into purpose and purpose into protection for others." Emma could not speak, just nodded, let the tears fall. 2 years after the Medicorp victory, Emma and William sat in his penthouse having their Tuesday dinner. This had become ritual. Every Tuesday evening, sometimes they talked about the foundation, sometimes about life, sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, the silence of family who did not need words to communicate. Tonight, William had something he needed to say. Something he had been carrying for 4 years. Ever since the night Emma whispered in his ear and stopped the signing. "Emma, there is something I need to tell you, something I should have told you years ago." Emma looked up from her pasta, saw the weight in William's face. "What is it?" William set down his fork, looked at her directly. "I knew. 3 years before you stopped the signing, my forensic team flagged irregularities in the Cross Foundation. They brought me a report showing suspicious money movements, shell companies, unusually high administrative costs, red flags that suggested fraud." Emma went still. "What did you do with the report?" "Nothing. I told them to put it aside. I said I would review it later. I never did." "Why?" William's voice broke. "Because I was suicidal. Not actively. I was not planning to kill myself, but passively. I did not care if I lived or died. Catherine was gone. Daniel was gone. I had nothing left that mattered. So when my team showed me evidence that the foundation I was planning to give everything to might be fraudulent, I chose not to look. Because part of me wanted to be conned, wanted to sign away everything, and then just stop existing. Emma felt like she had been punched. 4 years. She had known William for 4 years, and he had been carrying this. You knew there was fraud and you ignored it. I did not know the full scope. I did not know Daniel was alive. I did not know Victor had killed your father. But I knew something was wrong, and I chose not to investigate because I did not care. I was ready to sign everything away and then disappear. He looked at her with eyes full of shame. Your whisper did not just stop a fraud. It saved my life. You gave me a reason to care whether I lived or died. You reminded me that truth mattered, that I mattered, that there were still things worth fighting for. Emma sat in silence, processing. Part of her was angry. Her father might be alive if William had investigated 3 years earlier, might have had the institutional support to expose Victor before it turned deadly. But another part understood grief that made you stop caring, understood the passive wish for non-existence, understood how easy it was to let yourself be destroyed when everyone you loved was gone. Why are you telling me this now? Emma asked finally. Because you deserve the truth. Because I have been talking to Daniel about accountability and redemption, and I realized I was a hypocrite. I let my grief make me complicit. And I never told you, never admitted that I share responsibility for what happened. He paused. I am sorry. I am so sorry. If I had acted 3 years earlier, your father might still be alive. Victor might have been caught before he could hurt anyone. Daniel might have faced consequences before the fraud grew so massive. Emma looked at him. At this man who had become family, who had given her purpose and community and the resources to build something that mattered, who had honored her father by creating a foundation in his name. She thought about what she would tell him, thought about rage and blame and the desire to punish. But she also thought about her father, about what he would say, about forgiveness and second chances, and the understanding that people are complicated. William, Emma said slowly, what you did was wrong. Your grief does not excuse it. If you had investigated, my father might be alive. William nodded, accepted it. But, Emma continued, you also chose truth when I spoke to you. You could have ignored me, could have signed anyway, could have dismissed me as a crazy waitress with a conspiracy theory. But you did not. You listened. You investigated. You chose truth over comfort. She paused. My father said something in his last video. He said everyone has a moment where they choose truth or comfort. The brave choose truth even when it is terrifying. You had that moment twice. 3 years ago, you chose comfort. On the night I whispered, you chose truth. That is what matters. Are you saying you forgive me? Emma thought about it. Really thought. I am saying I understand. I am saying grief makes us all do things we regret. I am saying you have spent 4 years trying to make amends by building something that protects others. I am saying you chose to tell me the truth now, even though you did not have to. That takes courage. She reached across the table, took his hand. So yes, I forgive you. Not because what you did was okay, but because holding on to rage only destroys the person holding it. And I am done being destroyed by rage. I choose healing. I choose family. I choose you. William cried. 4 years of guilt releasing in tears he could not control. Emma moved to sit beside him, put her arm around his shoulders, let him grieve his complicity and his redemption, and the impossible grace of being forgiven when he did not deserve it. When he could speak again, William said something that Emma would remember forever. Your father raised an extraordinary person. I failed him by not investigating, but I can still honor him by making sure you never have to fail anyone the way I failed him. The foundation exists, so the next James Bennett has what yours did not. That has to be enough. It is enough, Emma said. It is more than enough. They finished dinner in peaceful silence, the kind that comes when hard truths have been spoken and accepted, when forgiveness has been offered and received, when family proves itself through choice rather than blood. 5 years after the night Emma whispered in William Garrett's ear at Le Sommet, the foundation held a gala at the same restaurant, full circle. the room where everything changed now hosting the celebration of what had been built from the wreckage. 500 guests, journalists from 70 countries, white dresses for female journalists, blue suits for male allies, families of those who had died seeking truth in the front rows. And at the back, standing because he refused to sit in the spotlight, William Garrett, 77 years old, healthier than he had been at 72. Purpose having saved him where wealth never could. Emma took the podium, looked out at the assembled faces, at 5 years of work made visible in the people who had been protected and the truths that had been spoken. 5 years ago, in this room, I was a waitress. I whispered 2 words to a man about to sign away his fortune. Stop. Don't sign. Those words changed everything, not just for him, not just for me, but for everyone in this room. She paused, let the weight of the moment settle. In 5 years, this foundation has funded 312 investigations, trained 1,600 journalists, supported 89 families who lost loved ones to truth-seeking, and achieved victories we could not have imagined. The Medicorp case alone resulted in justice for 63 families, prevented hundreds more deaths, changed how pharmaceutical testing is regulated internationally. Emma looked at William in the back row. But what I am most proud of is this. We created a community, a network, a promise that no one fights alone. My father died alone. Victor Cross made sure of that. But because of what we built, because of what you all contribute, the next James Bennett will not be alone. The next truth seeker will have support. The next family will have resources. She looked at her father's photo on the wall. Dad, we did not just finish what you started. We built something that ensures your work never ends, that your death meant something, that you are remembered not just for how you died, but for what you made possible. The room erupted in applause. Emma stepped away from the podium, walked to William, hugged him, whispered in his ear. Thank you for choosing life. Thank you for building this with me. Thank you for being the father I needed when mine was gone. William held her, this young woman who had saved his life in more ways than she would ever fully understand. After the gala, the core team gathered in Emma's office. Rachel, Grace, Margaret, William, and the staff who had been there from the beginning. They did not talk about numbers or victories. They talked about the people. About Dr. Okonkwo, who was now a global advocate for pharmaceutical ethics. About the journalists who had been extracted from dangerous situations. About the families who had been supported through impossible grief. Margaret pulled out a letter, handed it to Emma. This came today, from Daniel. Emma opened it, read, Dear Emma, 5 years ago you whispered 2 words that changed everything. You saved my father, stopped my crime, gave me a chance at redemption I did not deserve. I have 23 years left in here. 23 years to become the man my mother believed I could be. I teach GED classes. I mentor younger inmates. I attend therapy. I read my mother's letter every night before sleep. It is not enough. It will never be enough. But it is what I have. Thank you for giving my father a reason to keep living. Thank you for showing me that redemption is possible even when it seems impossible. Your almost brother, Daniel. Emma folded the letter carefully, put it in her desk drawer with the others Daniel had sent. Proof that change was slow but possible. That 23 years was a long time, but not forever. That the door she had left open might someday lead somewhere worth going. Marcus arrived to walk Emma home. They had been together for 3 years now, engaged for 6 months, planning a small wedding for next spring. Grace would be maid of honor. Lily would be flower girl. William would walk Emma down the aisle because her father could not. Margaret would cry through the whole ceremony. Rachel would give a toast about mentorship and found family. Life was happening, not just work, not just purpose, but actual life with all its messy, beautiful complications. As Emma and Marcus walked through Manhattan, she thought about the journey. From 19-year-old girl whose father had been murdered to 26-year-old woman running a foundation. From isolation and rage to community and purpose. From being someone who could only see truth as weapon to someone who understood truth needed compassion to matter. They passed Le Sommet. Emma stopped, looked at the restaurant, remembered the girl she had been, scared, desperate, carrying 6 years of evidence and hoping someone would listen. A young woman in a waitress uniform came out on break. Emma recognized herself in that woman. Tired, invisible, working a job that paid bills but cost dignity. Emma walked over. I used to work here. 6 years ago. I just wanted to say whatever dreams you have beyond this job, do not give up on them. You matter. Your voice matters. Voice. The waitress looked surprised, then grateful. Thank you. I needed to hear that today. Emma handed her a foundation business card. If you ever see something wrong and need someone to believe you, call this number. We listen. She walked away. Marcus had been watching. You cannot save everyone, he said gently. No, but I can remind them they matter, that someone is listening. If one person calls that number and we help them, it is worth it. They went home to the apartment they shared, made dinner together, talked about the wedding, about Grace's promotion, about Lily starting first grade, about ordinary beautiful things that made life worth living. That night, Emma pulled out her laptop, wrote in the journal she had started 2 years ago. Not about investigations or cases, about life, about healing, about the slow transformation from survivor to someone who actually lived. Today marks 5 years since I whispered in William Garrett's ear. 5 years since everything changed. Sometimes I think about the girl I was, so angry, so alone, so convinced that rage was the only appropriate response to loss. And I am grateful that girl existed. She was strong enough to survive, determined enough to finish what Dad started, brave enough to speak when no one else would. But I am also grateful I am not that girl anymore. I am someone who understands that community matters more than individual heroism, that forgiveness is stronger than rage, that love is what makes truth bearable. Dad, I miss you every day, but I am okay, better than okay. I am building the world you believed was possible, a world where truth matters, where the powerful are held accountable, where no one has to fight alone. And I am doing it surrounded by people who love me, Grace and Lily, Aunt Sarah, Rachel, Margaret, William, Marcus, the family I chose and who chose me. That is everything. That is what makes the cost worth it. Not the victories, not the headlines, but the people. Always the people. Emma closed the laptop, looked at her father's photo on her desk, smiled. Sleep well, Dad. Your work continues. And I am finally living the life you died hoping I would have. She turned off the light, went to bed beside Marcus, fell asleep easily for the first time in 6 years. No nightmares, no guilt, no rage keeping her awake. Just peace. The peace that comes from knowing you honored the dead by living well, by building something that outlasts grief, by choosing community over isolation and hope over despair. In a federal prison 2 hours north, Daniel Garrett read his mother's letter one more time before sleep, believed for the first time that 23 years might be enough, that redemption was not a fantasy, but a possibility earned through daily choice and decades of effort. In a penthouse overlooking Central Park, William Garrett held Catherine's photograph and whispered goodnight and felt something he had not felt in 15 years. Not just absence of grief, but presence of joy. Not just survival, but actual living. Not just wealth, but wealth of purpose and connection, and the knowledge that his remaining years would matter. And in offices around the world, journalists worked late into the night pursuing truth. Some of them supported by the foundation, some of them not even knowing it existed, but all of them connected by the belief that speaking truth matters, that someone has to be brave enough to say what others will not, that the cost is worth it because silence costs more. The next morning, Emma woke early, made coffee, sat at her kitchen table, and opened her laptop to the day's grant applications. Journalists in Myanmar, in Russia, in Mexico, all asking for support, all taking risks, all deserving of the protection her father never had. She approved 3 grants before Marcus woke up, made him breakfast, kissed him goodbye as he left for work, then returned to her computer and the endless work of supporting people who were braver than she would ever be. Her phone buzzed. William. Found another journal, this one from before Catherine got sick. Reading it makes me understand so much about who we were before grief broke us. Tuesday dinner tonight? Emma smiled, typed back. I will be there, see you at 7. She put down the phone, looked at her father's photo one more time, "We are doing it, Dad. We are building the world you believed was possible. We are making sure no one fights alone. We are proving truth matters." She paused. "And I am living, really living, not just surviving, not just working, but building a life full of people I love and purpose that matters and hope for the future. That is the real victory. Not the investigations or the headlines, but this. The fact that I can be both your daughter and my own person, that I can honor you and still have a life beyond honoring you." Emma turned back to her computer, back to the grant applications, back to the work of changing the world one protected journalist at a time. It was not glamorous, not dramatic, just the daily grinding effort of making sure truth had support and truth tellers had safety. But it was everything. It was purpose and community and legacy all woven together. It was her father's dream made real through her mother's absence, and Catherine's wisdom, and William's wealth, and Rachel's mentorship, and Grace's friendship, and the collective effort of everyone who believed truth mattered. The sun rose over Manhattan, light spilling through windows, a new day, another chance to make the world slightly better, another journalist to support, another family to protect, another truth to help speak. Emma smiled, took a sip of coffee, and got to work, because that was the real ending. Not a dramatic conclusion, but the ongoing commitment to show up every day and do the work that mattered. To honor the dead by protecting the living. To prove that one whisper could change everything, and that everything changed could ripple outward forever. Truth was worth the cost. Community made the cost bearable. Love made the truth possible. And hope made it all worthwhile. That was the lesson. That was the legacy. That was what they had all learned through pain and grief and the slow, hard work of becoming better than they had been. The whisper that stopped a signing had become a foundation. The waitress who spoke truth had become a leader. The billionaire who lost everything had found purpose. The son who betrayed his father was learning redemption. And the journalist who died seeking truth lived on through the daughter who made sure no one else would die alone. In the end, that was enough. Not perfect, but enough. And enough was everything.